Every year, like clockwork, the Hughes family threw a reunion that felt less like a gathering and more like a corporate merger crossed with a red carpet event. My cousin Madeline once said it best. It's like walking into a perfume cloud made of judgment and Rolexes. And yeah, she wasn't wrong. The chandeliers in my Aunt Claudia's estate sparkled like they were trying to blind us into forgetting we were all faking our smiles. The living room with its marble floors and absurdly tall ceilings echoed with the sound of competitive bragging. Stock portfolios, new yachts, boarding school acceptances for kids who still eat glue, it was all on display. I hovered by the oversized windows, champagne flute in hand, doing my best impression of wallpaper. I wore a simple navy dress, not flashy, not designer, just safe, forgettable, which in this family was armor. Delilah. My aunt's voice sliced through the buzz of conversation like a champagne saber. There you are, still doing that receptionist thing, dear. I sipped slowly. Administrative assistant, I replied with a practiced smile. Oh, of course, she said, her tone syrupy and sharp. Still at, what was it, peak strategy? Pinnacle advisory, I said quieter this time. Before I could escape, my cousin Travis swooped in. Fresh off making partner at his dad's firm, he gave me the same smirk he used to wear when he pulled my pigtails in elementary school. I could get you something real? You know, he said. We always need support staff at the firm. Better pay actual career trajectory. I wanted to laugh. The only reason I didn't was because I'd already pulled off my ultimate joke and they still didn't know it. Because Pinnacle Advisory wasn't just some firm. It was mine. And 10 years ago, this entire game started right here in this exact mansion. I just graduated with an MBA and a head full of ideas, especially one about helping struggling companies turn themselves around through radical restructuring and people-first strategy. I thought my family, who owned enough businesses to start their own stock exchange, might be interested. They weren't. Consulting Uncle Marcus had snorted over his scotch. Stick with the real moneymakers, kiddo. You can start in accounts payable and work your way up like your cousins. He said it like it was generous. What he meant was like the male cousins. In the Hughes empire, women married rich or managed HR. That's it. Entrepreneurship, leadership, unthinkable. Especially for someone like me, quiet, bookish, not particularly shiny. That night, I sat in the guest room and made two decisions. One, I would build my own company. Two, I would never ever let them know I was doing it. That's how Pinnacle Advisory was born. A cheap office above a Vietnamese noodle shop, one IKEA desk, and exactly $17,000 in savings. I didn't even have a logo. But I had something more powerful, an understanding of failure. I'd studied what made companies bleed money, what made them crumble under pressure, and more importantly, what kept them alive. My first client was a tiny textiles manufacturer on the verge of collapse. No one would touch them. I did. 3 months, some brutal negotiation with creditors, and a full workflow overhaul. Later, they were profitable. Word spread quietly. I built the company under the radar, hiring smart, scrappy people who signed ironclad NDAs. No one talked. No one posted. Every public face of the company was someone else. I kept the receptionist act up even as we grew. Even when we landed our first Fortune 100 client. Even when we opened branches in 5 cities. Even when I made my first million. Back home at gatherings like this, I played my part. The humble assistant. The girl who brought the cheese plate to the boardroom, not the one who built the boardroom. It wasn't pride, it was war. Because the Hughes family didn't just build businesses, they tore them down too. Their favorite game was acquiring small, struggling companies, usually for pennies, and flipping them for a fortune. Which meant Pinnacle's real purpose quickly became more than just fixing companies. We saved them from my family. Over the years, we blocked acquisition after acquisition, always subtly. An anonymous consulting firm swoops in, revives the business, and leaves quietly. Meanwhile, my uncles fumed, wondering why their takeover attempts kept slipping through their fingers. And no one ever suspected me. Until tonight. More bubbly sweetheart Aunt Claudia asked, raising a perfectly arched brow. Though maybe stick to sparkling water. I imagine your salary doesn't exactly cover Moet. I took the flute with a grin. Thanks. By the way, how's your new acquisition going? Sterling Components, wasn't it? Her smile twitched. Oh, some complications. But Marcus will sort it out. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that those complications. Yeah, those were me. 3 months ago, Sterling Components called us terrified. A sudden drop in stock, rumors of a hostile takeover. I knew the playbook had Hughes' fingerprints all over it. We stepped in, rebuilt their capital strategy, and partnered with legal advisors to lock out foreign buyers. Their stock had climbed 18% in the last quarter. Their board had refused Hughes's final offer just last week. But Aunt Claudia was still pretending everything was fine. And that was fine by me, until Travis opened his mouth. Heard some mystery consulting firm stepped in, he said, waving a dismissive hand. Probably some inexperienced kid burning through daddy's money. No skin in the game. I felt my phone buzz inside my clutch. One glance and my pulse jumped. Subject: urgent message. Sterling wants to discuss merger terms. Hughes Ventures scheduled for 9 a.m. They think they're meeting Pinnacle's exec team. You'll need to lead. See, it had begun. The wolves were at the door. Only this time the lamb had fangs. I pocketed my phone and turned back to Aunt Claudia with a bright smile. Actually, I need to head out a bit early. Big meeting in the morning. Oh, more scheduling meetings, she asked with a smirk. Something like that, I said. By morning, they'd find out exactly what kind of meetings I lead, and exactly who they'd been underestimating. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to savor it. After 10 years of building in the shadows of pretending to be less, today was the day the mask finally came off. I took my time getting ready, pressed navy suit, low bun, sharp heels that could double as weapons. Power dressing wasn't about fashion, it was armor. And today I was going into battle. As my private elevator carried me to the top floor of Pinnacle Advisory's downtown headquarters, I felt the adrenaline start to hum. My assistant Cam was waiting with his usual efficiency and zero chill. "They're here," he whispered as the doors opened. "Your Uncle Marcus, Aunt Claudia, Travis, he brought legal counsel, probably trying to flex. They asked for coffee." I smiled. "Did they ask for me by name?" "Nope," he said, eyes twinkling. "Still expecting a faceless CEO. Probably assume you're home printing spreadsheets." I glanced at the glass wall ahead, caught a flash of my reflection. I didn't see the assistant they thought I was. I saw the woman who built a company that made theirs obsolete. "Send them into the main conference room," I said, "and give them 15 minutes to settle in. Let the tension simmer." "On it," he said, already walking. I waited exactly 13 minutes. Not because I was superstitious, but because they hated unpredictability. And I wanted them just unsettled enough to doubt themselves. By the time I pushed open the double doors, the room was buzzing. My uncle sat at the head of the table like he'd already assumed command. Travis flanked him, tie slightly loose, trying too hard to look relaxed. Their legal rep, a bored-looking man in a $3,000 suit, was mid-sentence. Everyone froze when they saw me. Aunt Claudia blinked first. "Delilah." "What are you? Where's the executive team?" I walked calmly to the head of the table. "The real one." "Right here," I said, pulling out the chair and sitting down. "Good morning, everyone," Travis snorted. "Wait, you're leading this." My uncle leaned forward, voice low and commanding. "Delilah, we don't have time for games. We're here to speak with the CEO of Pinnacle." "Perfect," I replied, sliding the folder in front of me. "Let's begin." Silence. Not awkward, not confused, shocked. It took a full 5 seconds before anyone spoke. "You're the CEO?" Travis finally asked, laughing like I'd just told them I was secretly a ninja. "I am," I said simply. "Founder and CEO of Pinnacle Advisory. Since day one." Aunt Claudia looked like she'd just swallowed a lemon. "That's impossible. You're an assistant. You've always been unseen," I offered. "Underestimated." "That's kind of the point." Uncle Marcus's expression hardened. "This is a mistake. Pinnacle Advisory is not a toy, Delilah. We've invested serious capital into this merger discussion." "Exactly," I said, leaning forward. "Which is why I suggest we keep this professional. Here are the terms of the proposed merger between Hughes Ventures and Sterling Components pending Pinnacle's approval." Cam entered on cue, distributing the contracts with smooth precision. I watched as Travis skimmed page 1 and immediately stiffened. "You're blocking the acquisition," he said. "We're not blocking it," I said. "We're restructuring it. If you want a stake in Sterling, you'll follow our conditions. And if we don't," Uncle Marcus growled, "then Pinnacle begins acquiring Hughes Ventures shares on the open market. We're already prepared. You'll be outvoted at your next board meeting by Wednesday." That's when the panic started. You could feel it like someone opened a window during a storm. Their lawyer suddenly looked a lot less bored. Aunt Claudia was texting someone under the table. Travis looked like he was trying to remember if crying would ruin his brand. "Is this revenge?" she hissed. "All this time you've been spying on us?" I shook my head. "No. I've been saving the companies you've tried to destroy. Sterling, Coppertech, Meridian Freight, all of them came to us for help. You sabotaged your own family, Uncle Marcus barked. You never saw me as family, I said. You saw me as decoration, background noise, a paper pusher in a pencil skirt. Travis leaned forward, voice dripping arrogance. You can't possibly believe we'd agree to this. You don't have the leverage. Cam stepped forward, placing a single-page summary on the table. Actually, I said, nodding toward the sheet we do. Our assets exceed 90 billion and we now hold 22% of Hughes Ventures voting shares. One phone call and we'll make it 30% by tomorrow. We're not negotiating because we need you. We're negotiating because we chose to give you a seat at the table. The silence this time was different. It wasn't shock. It was fear. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of respect. I'll give you until 5 p.m., I said, standing. Review the terms. If you accept, we move forward with the merger under Pinnacle's supervision. If not, I paused at the door. Well, let's just say the market reacts quickly to uncertainty. I walked out, heels echoing on polished floors, and didn't look back. Cam followed. That was... He started, then shook his head. I mean, damn. Thanks, I said, exhaling slowly for the first time all morning. Have Maya block the rest of my morning. I need quiet. Back in my office, I closed the door, collapsed onto the couch, and stared at the ceiling. The moment was everything I'd planned for. And yet somehow it still didn't feel real. 10 years of silence. 10 years of watching them mock me to my face. 10 years of sipping coffee in rooms I built, listening to them talk about how little I mattered. And now they had to go through me. That afternoon, the emails started. Some panicked, some condescending, some surprisingly apologetic. By 3 p.m., Travis had requested a private discussion. At 3:15, Claudia offered to host a family-only resolution dinner. Uncle Marcus called twice. I didn't answer either time. At 4:52 p.m., Cam knocked once. They've signed, he said. I nodded. And he added, news just broke. Finance Weekly is running a cover story. Headline says, former assistant exposes billion-dollar family empire. I laughed, and it felt real deep, sharp, cathartic. About time, I said. I poured a glass of champagne, the good stuff from the vineyard we acquired last spring, and walked to the window. From here, you could see the whole city. My city. A place where I'd spent a decade being overlooked. And now they'd all remember my name. They say silence can be louder than words. By the next morning, my phone wasn't ringing, it was buzzing. Emails, texts, voicemails, everything short of smoke signals. It was like dropping a boulder into still water and watching the ripples slam into every shoreline. Aunt Claudia's message came first. Let's chat over lunch, sweetheart. I think there's been some miscommunication. Family is family. Translation. We didn't think you'd win. Now we want in. Then Travis D, you were amazing yesterday. Truly. Proud of you. Let's strategize sometime. Family brand potential is huge. Amazing how fast someone goes from mocking your salary to suggesting joint ventures when the money shifts. I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on the board at Hughes Ventures. Unlike my relatives, those people actually paid attention. By noon, they'd convened an emergency meeting. And by 3:17 p.m., my inbox pinged. Subject: merger terms. Approved unanimously. And just like that, Pinnacle had a seat not just at the table but at the head of it. Uncle Marcus didn't take it well. He barged into my office like a storm cloud in a suit, eyes blazing and ego in full swing. You played us, he said. No hello, no warm-up. I didn't look up from my screen. I gave you options. You made your choices. You could have told me. I finally raised my head. And what would you have done? Listened, supported me like you did back when I first pitched the idea, and you laughed me out of the room. That was different. It wasn't, I said, calm but direct. You just didn't think I had what it took, so I showed you. His jaw clenched. You betrayed this family. That was rich coming from the man who once sold off a cousin's startup behind her back because it threatened one of his subsidiaries. I stood up, walked around the desk, and handed him a folder. These are the final merger amendments. Pinnacle acquires 51% control. Your name stays on the letterhead for now, but all strategic decisions go through us. He opened it with shaky hands. You think this is leadership strong-arming your own blood? I leaned against the edge of the desk. No, I think this is business, the kind you taught me, kill or be killed. Remember? His shoulders sagged just a little. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. I underestimated you, he said finally. That was your first mistake, I replied. The second was assuming I needed your validation to succeed. He left without saying another word. After he was gone, I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I didn't pour champagne. Instead, I sat at my desk and let the weight of it hit me. This empire I'd built, it was mine. Every brick, every client, every sleepless night and backhanded compliment and fake smile I'd endured at Hugh's dinners. But now came the harder part, turning the wreckage into something better. Because while I'd won, the war wasn't over. Not really. Hugh's ventures had been built on manipulation shortcuts and taking advantage of vulnerability. That wouldn't change overnight. So I called a meeting. All department heads, all execs, no fluff. In that conference room, the same one I used to drop off pastries for during early morning board sessions, I laid out my plan. We're shifting the entire company's model, I said, pointer and hand slides glowing behind me. We don't take, we build. We don't gut companies for short-term gain. We partner. Innovate, grow. Some nodded cautiously. Others looked skeptical. A few looked straight up terrified. Is this permanent, one executive asked? Yes, I said. And if that's a problem, there's the door. Severance will be generous. They stayed. Because deep down, even the sharks could smell the blood in the water their own. The market was changing, and they knew it. And Pinnacle. We were already 10 steps ahead. That night, as I left the office, Cam walked me to the elevator. You sure about this? He asked. You could have stayed behind the curtain, run things quietly. Less drama, less them. I know, I said. But change doesn't happen quietly. It happens when people like us take up space they never wanted us to have. He smiled. Remind me to put that on a mug. At home, I kicked off my heels, poured a glass of wine, and did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mom. She'd divorced out of the Hughes family before I was even in high school. Moved across the country, started her own practice, never looked back. She answered on the second ring. Is it true, she asked. I laughed. Depends on what part made it to you. That you own Pinnacle. That you flipped the board. That you made your uncle sign a deal like he was selling you a car. Then, yeah, I said, it's true. There was a pause. I'm proud of you, Delilah. I blinked hard. It hit different hearing it from someone who never needed me to prove anything. Thanks, Mom. We talked for another hour. Not just about the company, but about everything. My life, hers, the things we both left behind. After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling and let the quiet wrap around me. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was close. The next few days moved fast. Articles flooded in headlines screaming about the secret CEO, the undercover boss, the woman who built a billion-dollar firm while bringing coffee. The story went viral, of course. People love an underdog, especially when the underdog doesn't just win but owns the stadium. But it wasn't just the press, it was the people. I started getting messages from women I'd never met. College students, young professionals, women stuck in middle management who were tired of being overlooked. You made me believe I could do this. I thought I was the only one pretending to be smaller just to survive. My boss still calls me kiddo, not anymore. I read every single one, even the angry ones. Because yeah, there were plenty of those too. Entitlement doesn't die easy. Travis posted a long LinkedIn essay claiming he always believed in me and that this was a joint family success. He included a photo of us from 3 years ago, me blurry in the background holding a coffee tray. I laughed so hard I nearly choked. By Friday, his law firm released a statement. Travis Hughes will be taking an extended leave to focus on family. I bet he will. Meanwhile, Aunt Claudia had pivoted to interviews. We're so proud of Delilah. She's a testament to the Hughes legacy. I released a short clip in response. A recording from last year's reunion where she told my cousin's new wife, Delilah, she'll be lucky if she ends up managing a copy room. The video hit 1 million views in 2 days. She stopped doing interviews after that. And me. I kept moving. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about rewriting the rules. Not just for me, but for every woman who ever got talked over in a meeting, dismissed in an interview, or handed someone's dry cleaning instead of being handed a promotion. We weren't background anymore. We were building something real. And people were finally noticing. There's something strange about getting everything you ever wanted. Not because it feels wrong, but because for a second it feels quiet. Like the storm passed and left you standing there soaked but whole, wondering what to do with the silence. The following Monday, I walked into Pinnacle's executive floor and everyone stood a little taller. Smiles came easier. Doors opened faster. People were watching me differently now, like they were finally seeing what I'd always been. But the truth, I hadn't changed. They had. It was a subtle shift, but I could feel it everywhere. Even the barista downstairs who used to misspell my name had started writing it in perfect calligraphy. With 2 L's right, he asked, suddenly attentive. Cam, ever? The master of understatement smirked as he handed me my morning espresso. So, CEO of the year, what's next? Do we start printing Pinnacle owns the Hughes family on t-shirts or keep it classy? I grinned. Let's keep it classy. For now. But privately, I was already planning the next phase. This wasn't just about showing up my family anymore. That was done. They knew who I was now. The world did too. Now it was about proving something else that we could lead differently. That power didn't have to come with cruelty. That success didn't need to mean stepping over people. That maybe, just maybe, business could be better. And that started with us. I called a leadership meeting with every division head at Pinnacle and Hughes Ventures. A dozen people flew in from other cities. Some were veterans who'd made their living trimming the fat out of companies until there was nothing left but a profitable shell. Others were newer faces, people I'd quietly recruited over the years, people who actually gave a damn. I walked into the room and stood at the head of the table, the same table where not long ago I was expected to pour coffee and stay quiet. Not anymore. Let's talk about what comes next, I said. A few older execs stiffened. Change scared them. I understood that. But fear didn't stop me before, and it wouldn't now. We're restructuring, I continued. Not just companies, us. Our approach, our reputation, our values. That last word made someone snort quietly. I clocked it but didn't call it out, not yet. From now on, we don't gut businesses to inflate short-term numbers. We rebuild them. We don't treat people like assets, we invest in them. And if that's not your style, I respect that. But there's the door. I didn't say it like a threat, I meant it. Surprisingly, no one moved. Some shifted in their chairs, a few scribbled notes. One woman, Melinda from operations, smiled like someone who had been waiting her entire career to hear those words out loud. Good. We started rolling out initiatives that week. A mentoring program for women and underrepresented staff. A startup grant program for small businesses we believed in. Internal training for ethical leadership. It was slow at first, the machine wasn't used to changing direction, but piece by piece it turned. The media caught wind quickly. The quiet CEO who turned Wall Street on its head became a headline again, this time not for revenge but for reform. And just like that, a new chapter started. But the past? It wasn't done with me yet. It was Thursday morning when Cam walked into my office looking unusually serious. "You're not gonna love this," he said, holding up his tablet. "Check this out." A video was going viral. Someone had leaked a clip from a private Hughes board call, the tail end of an argument between Travis and Uncle Marcus. "She humiliated us," Marcus snapped. Travis's voice. "She outplayed us, Dad. You can either adapt or retire or get pushed out." Then silence. Then Marcus's voice again, lower this time. "She wants to take everything. Even the name." It cut off after that. I stared at the screen. It wasn't the betrayal that stung. It was the fact that they still didn't get it. I wasn't trying to take everything. Just the parts they never deserved in the first place. Later that afternoon, Travis showed up at Pinnacle's office unannounced. Cam texted me. "Do I let him up or feed him to the revolving door?" "Let him up," I replied. "Let's hear what he has to say." He walked in with the confidence of a man who thought he could still charm his way out of an avalanche. "Delilah," he said with that same smirk I'd seen 1,000 times. "You've built something incredible. No one's denying that. Yet." He chuckled, taking a seat without asking. "Look, I get it. You've made your point, but this public feud, it's not helping either of us. What if we reframed it? A family redemption arc, joint press tour, speaking gigs, podcasts." I raised an eyebrow. "You think this is about optics?" "It's about business," he said. "You've got the power, but we've got the name recognition. Combine the two and Travis," I said, cutting him off, "you still think this is about you, about saving face, about twisting the story so the world still sees the Hughes family as some misunderstood dynasty. But I'm not interested in saving the old system. I'm burning it down." He shifted, thrown off by the calm in my voice. "Look," he said, dropping the act for a moment. "Dad's not doing well. The board is considering a formal vote to move him out." "You don't have to push." "I'm not," I said. "I'm just letting gravity do its job." He looked down, then back up. "I don't want to be your enemy." "You never were," I said. "You were just a mirror." That quieted him. He left with no deals, no joint ventures, no redemption arc, and I felt lighter. That night I stood on my apartment balcony, glass of wine in hand, watching the city lights flicker. Somewhere, people were probably still reading headlines about me, still debating whether I was a genius or a villain, still whispering about how I'd fooled them all. But I wasn't trying to fool anyone. I just stopped asking for permission. And that changed everything. My mom called that evening. I told her about the meeting, about Travis, about how things were changing faster than I could process. You sound tired, she said gently. I am. You sound powerful too. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. That part feels new. It's not new, sweetheart. You just finally let the world see it. I ended the call feeling steadier. Tomorrow, I'd fly out to visit one of our new partner companies, a small woman-run logistics startup on the brink of something great. We'd fund them, mentor them, maybe even learn something ourselves. That was the new model. We didn't dominate. We elevated. Because power isn't about control. It's about what you build with it. And I wasn't done building yet. Change doesn't always crash like thunder. Sometimes it whispers in the corners of rooms people used to ignore you in. A week after Travis's failed peace offering, things at Hughes Ventures felt different. Not loud, not obvious, just quieter. Meetings ran smoother. People listened longer before interrupting. Executives who used to dodge responsibility were suddenly emailing follow-ups with "per your guidance" in bold font. But more than that, people were asking questions they never used to ask. Not just what's the quarterly goal, but who's this going to affect and is there a better way? That shift, however small, felt like revolution. Still, I knew better than to celebrate too early. The past has a habit of circling back when you least expect it. On a rainy Wednesday morning, I got a call from Maya, my former assistant, now director of strategic projects. She didn't waste time. "We've got a problem," she said. "Sterling components." My stomach dropped. We'd built our name helping Sterling claw its way back from a hostile takeover. But now, just 6 months later, one of their biggest suppliers was defaulting, threatening their new momentum. "What's the exposure?" "Massive," she replied. "And the Hughes family. They know. Travis and Marcus have been making calls. Rumor is they're trying to poach Sterling back through backdoor channels." Of course they were. Old habits die hard. I exhaled slowly. "Loop in the legal team and get me a meeting with Sterling's board. Today." Already on it. I hung up and stared out the window as fat droplets smeared across the glass. This wasn't just business, this was personal. My family had spent years tearing companies apart when they thought no one was watching. Now they knew I was watching and they still couldn't help themselves. It wasn't about profit anymore. It was about winning. Or more accurately, about not letting me win. That afternoon, I walked into Sterling's boardroom to a table full of anxious faces. I could see it in their eyes, fear creeping back in. Old trauma resurfacing. I stood at the head of the table, calm and certain. "We're not letting this fall apart," I said. "But if we lose that supplier, then we find another. Better, faster, one that aligns with the new vision." Someone across the table shook their head. "That'll take months. And if the Hughes Group makes an offer—" "They won't," I said, voice steady. "Because they'll be too busy cleaning up their own mess." Before anyone could ask, I placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents Maya had pulled, proof that Marcus and Travis had attempted to corner Sterling's suppliers by buying out their debt at a discount. Old school leverage play. Unfortunately for them, they'd used holding companies we already tracked. "You don't need to panic," I told the board. "You need to pivot. And we're going to help you do it." By the time I left that meeting, Sterling's board had unanimously voted to extend their partnership with Pinnacle for another 3 years. But the real satisfaction came later. I was in my office, finally breathing again, when Cam walked in with a grin. "You're going to love this," he said, dropping a printout on my desk. It was a press release. Hughes Ventures Leadership Shakeup. Marcus Hughes resigns as chair. I blinked. Then read it again. Effective immediately, it said. Mr. Hughes will remain available in an advisory capacity but has stepped down from day-to-day leadership. A note at the bottom included a quote, "bland, polished, obviously lawyer approved." But none of that mattered. What mattered was the shift, the weight sliding off the shoulders of a company too long trapped in the grip of one man's ego. I closed my eyes for a second and let that truth settle in. I hadn't pushed him out. I hadn't needed to. He'd collapsed under the pressure of accountability. The one force he'd never planned for. Later that evening, my mom called again. "Heard about Marcus," she said. "That must feel satisfying." "It does," I admitted, "but mostly it just feels quiet." Good quiet. Still figuring that part out. There was a pause. "Then I'm proud of you, you know. Not just for winning, but for not becoming like them." That stuck with me more than I expected. Because I could have. At any point, I could have turned ruthless. I could have wielded my power like a sword instead of a bridge. But I didn't. And that mattered. That weekend, I flew out to meet with the logistics startup we'd decided to back, Juniper Freight. It was run by a woman named Yvette, a former truck driver who built her company from scratch in an industry that rarely made space for people like her. We sat on folding chairs in the middle of her warehouse surrounded by forklifts and boxes drinking coffee from cracked mugs. "You're not what I expected," she said, watching me. "Good or bad?" She grinned. "Better. You listen." "I spent 10 years being invisible," I replied. "Turns out you hear a lot when no one's watching." She nodded slowly. "People think success is loud, but the real kind, it's built when no one's clapping." That stayed with me. Back in the city, news of Hughes Ventures restructuring spread like wildfire. Headlines ranged from "dramatic dynasty dismantled" to "curious the rise of quiet power." Everyone wanted interviews, features, think pieces. I declined most of them. Because the truth was, I didn't do this to be famous. I did it to make something different. Something better. Travis tried once more. This time, it wasn't a pitch. It was a message. Just one line. "You win." "Happy now?" I didn't reply. Because it wasn't about being happy. It was about being free. Free to choose what kind of leader I wanted to be. Free to give others the chances I had to take by force. Free to walk into any boardroom, any business, any empire, and know I built my seat at the table brick by brick, with no shortcuts. And no apologies. 3 months later, everything had changed. And yet, in a strange way, everything had stayed the same. The same city skyline glimmered outside my window. The same elevator dinged every morning. The same aroma of dark roast drifted up from the lobby cafe I now technically owned. But underneath it all, something was different. I was different. Not louder, not harsher, just clear. My schedule had become chaos in heels. Between interviews I didn't ask for and invitations I never thought I'd get, I was juggling more than I ever had. But I wasn't overwhelmed. Because this time I was choosing all of it. At Pinnacle, the energy had shifted. People walked with purpose. They asked bigger questions, challenged assumptions, and most importantly, they listened more. We had just finalized a massive partnership with 3 minority-owned firms to launch an accelerator program for small businesses, especially those left behind by traditional investors. The deal had taken months of delicate negotiation, but when it closed, it felt like planting something real. Something that would grow long after I was gone. Cam popped into my office one morning waving a document. "We got another one," he said, grinning. "TechScope wants to sell. Quiet acquisition. They asked for you by name." I raised an eyebrow. "Did they offer terms?" "They basically said, whatever she wants." I couldn't help but laugh. I remembered TechScope. 5 years ago, they ignored my pitch in favor of a male-run consultancy that folded 6 months later. Funny how memory works when the power shifts. "Draft it," I said. "But tell them we don't buy to flip. We build. If they want in, they'll need to be ready for change." Cam nodded and disappeared, already texting legal. As I turned back to my desk, I spotted the framed photo on the shelf, me standing outside the tiny office above that noodle shop, grinning in the rain the day we signed our first client. I kept that photo there for a reason. To remember that it hadn't always looked like this. That I hadn't always felt like this. Later that week, I hosted the first ever Pinnacle Future Leaders Summit, our version of a think tank meets mentorship retreat. We brought in college students, interns, junior employees, all overlooked by traditional leadership pipelines. During a panel, a young woman raised her hand, probably 21, fresh-eyed, determined. "How did you know when it was time to stop hiding?" she asked. I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I remembered. The coffee trays. The fake smiles. The way people talked around me like I wasn't there. I took a breath. "I didn't stop hiding," I said. "I started choosing where to shine." Silence. Then applause. And in that moment, I realized something. It was never about revenge. Not really. It was about choice. About refusing to play by rules that were never made for people like me and making space for others to write new ones. One afternoon, a letter arrived on my desk. Handwritten. No return address. But the cursive was unmistakable. "Delilah, I've retired. Officially this time." I wanted to say, "You were right. Not just about the company, about everything. I spent my life chasing power like it was air, but you showed me what it looks like when power lifts people instead of crushing them. I hope you'll keep doing that, even if my name's not on the building anymore. MH." I stared at the signature, Marcus Hughes. No dramatic flourish, no ego. Just honesty. Maybe even regret. And I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. That spring, I hosted the family reunion. In my conference center. Not at a mansion. Not under chandeliers. But in the same room where I'd once served coffee while people talked about my lack of ambition. We catered from the noodle shop above my old office. The owner, Mrs. Tron, nearly cried when I called. She brought enough food for 3 reunions. The vibe was different this time. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years came up with warm smiles, some sheepish, some proud, all curious. Even Aunt Claudia showed up, though she brought store-bought macarons like an olive branch in pastel colors. She greeted me with a tight hug. "Delilah, darling, look at you. You've turned this place into something real." I smiled just enough. I always had. You just didn't see it. To her credit, she didn't argue. Travis kept his distance for most of the night, lingering by the drinks table. Eventually, he wandered over, hands in his pockets. "I guess you were always the one we should have backed," he said. I shrugged. "Too bad your vision didn't come with glasses." He chuckled. "Fair enough." We clinked glasses. No apology, no reconciliation, just acknowledgement. And that was enough. I wasn't looking to be loved. I was just done being dismissed. On the final night of the summit, I found myself alone in the main hall, lights low, the last of the guests gone. Cam walked in holding 2 mugs of coffee, the good stuff from our in-house cafe. "You know," he said, settling into the seat beside me, "for someone who built an empire, you really don't like sitting on a throne." I laughed softly. "Never wanted a throne, just wanted my own seat." He raised his mug. "Well, you built the whole damn table." I looked around the space, at the glass walls, the city lights beyond them, the quiet hum of possibility. This wasn't just a company. It was a statement, a legacy. Not one defined by acquisition or control, but by the people we lifted, the companies we saved, the futures we made possible. And somewhere out there, I knew there were more like me. People serving coffee while dreaming bigger. People sitting at the edges of power, waiting for their moment to walk in and claim it. And when they did, I wanted them to know there was room for them here. Because the truth is, real power doesn't announce itself. It builds, quietly, relentlessly, until one day the world can't ignore it anymore. And when that moment comes, you don't need revenge. You just need to be ready. Story 2. My 25th birthday is here, and it seems like any other day. On my way home from work, I stopped at the grocery store to buy myself a cake. It was a simple chocolate cake with the words "Happy Birthday" inscribed in pink icing. Even though I didn't anticipate a lot of festivities, I had hoped that this year would be different. Nobody even looked up as I entered the front door. Greggy. My stepfather was lounging on the couch watching TV while Mom was in the kitchen making supper. As usual, his children Jason and Amber were riveted to their phones. Setting the cake on the kitchen counter, I declared, "I'm home." Mom looked over. "Is it a cake?" "Robin?" Abruptly, her eyes grew wide. "Hold on. Is it your birthday today?" The familiar was sitting there, forgotten, and there it was. "Yes," I stated plainly. "Today is the 25th. Greg, Amber, and Jason wandered into the kitchen. "Okay, cheers to your birthday." With that phony smile, he said, "I've become hateful. You didn't get anything from us. Gifts aren't the most essential thing, though, are they? It's focus." When I reminded them, Mom nodded as like they hadn't simply forgotten about me entirely. Nevertheless, I faked a grin and thanked them. We had a clumsy birthday tea around the table. I excused myself to take a quick shower and change out of my work clothes. I came back to find that they had eaten most of my cake, leaving me a pitiful little piece. Normal. Reminiscences came flooding back as I sat there plucking at my little slice of cake. This disdain was nothing new. For the past 7 years, that had been my reality. Because my mother married Greg when I was 18. We were both deeply affected by Dad's passing 2 years after he passed away. Within months of receiving a cancer diagnosis, he passed away. I tried to be strong for the two of us as Mom broke down. I was just 16 at the time, and I was having a hard time dealing with my loss while I watched my mother descend into despair. In fact, I felt relieved when she met Greg at work a year later. I felt satisfied when he brought back her grin. In my mind, the timeline is flawless. When they were married, I was 18 and I had already left for college in another state. I didn't realize how differently they regarded me at the time. I only went home on vacations, and when I did, I was usually hanging out with my high school pals rather than at home. Mom contacted me crying, so I moved back home after graduation. She clarified that Greg was experiencing health issues. My pay is insufficient to cover the expenses and the children, and he is no longer able to work full-time. I decided to remain since Jason was 12 and Amber was 14. I returned to my childhood bedroom after landing a respectable job at a nearby company as a marketing assistant. Every month, I handed Mom a sizable amount of my money to help with bills, food, and other costs. At first, I didn't mind. After all, they were family and family supports one another. Dad would have preferred that. But when I turned 23, everything changed. At first, the complaint was little. "Don't you think you could help out a little more with home expenditures, Robin?" Mom would inquire. "These days, everything is becoming so costly." Every time I answered work calls in the evening, Greg would wince. "Must you speak so loudly?" After a challenging day, some of us are attempting to unwind. Amber then began to look around my room. One evening during supper, she complained, "My room is way too small. The size of Robin's chamber is doubled. It's unfair." For months, I tried to be understanding while listening to their grievances in silence. However, I lost my temper one evening after a particularly trying day at work in which I had been passed up for a promotion. As we went down to eat, Mom said, "Robin, you really need to start giving us more for expenses. This month's power bill was ridiculous. Could you also cut back on the amount of time you spend in the restroom in the mornings?" Amber also said. "You're the reason I'm usually late for school." "Yes, and you consume all of the delicious food," Jason added his voice. I felt something shatter inside. With a loud clatter, I dropped my knife and fork upon the table. "Right now, are you kidding me?" I said, raising my voice. "Every bill in this house is paid by me. In case you have all conveniently forgotten, I am the legal owner of this house. Dad's will left it to me. You are welcome to dwell at my home." The ensuing hush was deafening. My shout stunned them all, and they all gazed at me. Greg's interest in his plate suddenly grew when Mom's face turned crimson. They were aware of my correctness. I owned the house. In addition to a little bequest that I utilized to pay the property taxes when I reached 18, Dad had expressly given it to me before he passed away. The remainder of the meal was spent in awkward silence. Mom continued to give me glares, but I didn't back down or say I was sorry. My bedroom door was gently knocked on later that evening. Without waiting for my answer, Mom came in. "We must discuss what transpired during dinner," she stated in a firm tone. "You ought not to have addressed us in such a manner. It was insulting and totally needless to bring up the fact that you own the house. Painful. What about the way you guys treat me like I'm just a walking ATM?" Mom's eyes are watering. When confronted, she uses this method. "Robin, you're being self-centered. We are related. You now have a house thanks to us. You have a house because to me." I corrected her. "I live here. You see, once more, there you go." She departed with the door firmly shut behind her, saying, "Your father would be so disappointed in you with that parting shot." With tears running down my cheeks, I reclined on my bed. Was I being self-centered? As usual, the uncertainty slithered in. Although my father instilled in me the importance of family, I don't believe he had any intention of my turning into a doormat. Even still, the shame that accompanied me to bed that night persisted. 2 months have passed since that discussion. Since then, there has been tension and everyone is cautious near one another. I have nothing to show for my 25th birthday other than a small piece of store-bought cake and a family that hardly acknowledges my existence. Christmas came sooner than I thought. I wanted to make the occasion memorable even though I was stressed out after my birthday incident. I meticulously chose gifts for everyone over the course of several weeks. A high-end scarf for Mom, Greg's collection of fine whiskey, Jason's newest video game, and Amber's pricey perfume. In addition, I gave Mom additional cash for the holidays. Mom said last week that we would be spending Christmas at home. Just a little family get-together. She seemed to be reminding me of my alleged selfishness by emphasizing family. I carefully wrapped every gift in the hopes that it might heal our differences. I'm a fool. The aroma of Mom's cinnamon pastries filled the home when Christmas morning dawned. It briefly reminded me of the days before Greg and his children came in and before Dad passed away. Prior to me being the family's ATM. They opened my gifts and I watched. Greg lifted his eyebrows gratefully at the whiskey and Mom appeared quite delighted with her scarf. Even Amber managed a grudging thank you for the perfume and Jason ripped into the game's wrapper right away. Then my mother gave me a little shoddy-wrapped box. She added, "This is from all of us." There was a simple gray sweater inside still wearing its sale tag. I recognized it from Target's clearance rack, where it was discounted from $24.99. I made an effort to grin. "Thank you." For Christmas dinner, we sat around the dining table. With a feast, Mom had gone above and beyond, stuffing turkey mashed potatoes and 3 sides of vegetables. The formal china which was saved for important events was gone. Mom cleared her throat after we completed the main meal. I must make an announcement. She proudly smiled at Greg as she grabbed for his hand. Greg is back to work full-time after a full recovery. In addition to it, he was promoted. He will receive a substantial pay raise as the new regional manager. Everyone cheered and applauded. A sense of relief swept over me. At last, I could reduce the amount of money I gave them. I might be able to start saving for that European vacation. I had been having dreams about it. Mom turned to face me, her expression unreadable, and went on, "It's time for some adjustments around here, we've decided. We believe it would be better if you moved out because we are no longer in need of your financial support." I almost choked. "What?" As if she hadn't just dropped a bombshell, Mom went on, "Amber will be taking your room. She needs more room as she gets older." Amber enthusiastically clapped her hands. "I've chosen fresh paint colors already, contemplating a lavender motif." I gaped at them in disbelief. "Let me clarify. For the past 3 years, I have been providing for your entire home by purchasing your food and paying your expenses. And you're throwing me out now that you don't need my money." "Robin, it's not like that. You are now 25. Isn't it time you got a home of your own? The majority of people your age no longer reside with their parents. The majority of people my age do not provide for their parents and step-siblings financially." Amber laughed and I shouted back, "You may still purchase food and pay our bills if you'd like. We will not refuse free money." Except for me, everyone at the table laughed. Without saying another word, my cheeks burned with shame and rage. I slammed the door behind me as I headed to my room. As they continued their Christmas party downstairs, I laid in bed and listened. The floor echoed with their laughing. As I lay there, each blast like a dagger twisting in my chest. The last 3 years' worth of memories came flooding back to me like a depressing movie reel. When I couldn't afford the trip and the expenses for that month, I missed a friend's destination wedding. I declined the promotion as it would have entailed moving. Since Mom was constantly requesting a little extra, I couldn't justify getting a new car, so I continued to drive my dad's old Honda, which had 200,000 miles on it. My birthday is this month. My birthdays, my God. Birthdays that had been ignored or barely recognized over the previous 7 years suddenly came flooding back. The moment my mother brought me dish towels. Greg sent a $5 gift card to a coffee establishment that year. Amber and Jason didn't even recognize me on my birthday, too preoccupied with their own lives to pay attention. In the meantime, I recalled how extravagantly I had attended their 50th birthday celebrations for Mom. For Amber's 16th birthday, I planned a surprise celebration and bought her the watch she had been coveting for months. Last year, I made a significant contribution to the extravagant celebration that Greg and Mom organized for Jason's birthday. I gave him the game system he requested. Like a pressure cooker, the wrath grew within of me. All of them had taken advantage of me. And they were throwing me out like yesterday's garbage now that Greg got this promotion. They appear to have overlooked one important point, though. I lived here. When Dad passed away, he gave it to me. He was aware of my deep affection for this location. With the window seat in my bedroom where I used to spend hours reading and the creaking third step. He ensured that I would always have a place to call home, and now they sought to rob me of that as well. My melancholy was quickly turning into a calculating, icy rage. They were in for another surprise if they believed they could push me about. I had changed from the innocent 18-year-old who was yearning for her mother's praise and would stop at nothing to maintain harmony in the household. I sat up after wiping away my tears. It was enough. I've spent too much time being a doormat. It was time for me to assert myself. Actually, get up. Not only short-lived tantrums followed by complacency and remorse, I took out my laptop and began reading up on tenant rights, eviction procedures, and property laws. Despite the fact that we lacked a written leasing agreement, it was time for me to act like the legitimate owner of this mansion. I made my choice as midnight drew near and the noise of the festivities finally subsided. They want my departure. All right. However, they would also be leaving. I had had enough of sharing this place with people who didn't value me. The following morning, I had a clear plan and got up early. There was silence in the house. After their Christmas feast, everyone was still asleep. Dad used to store his tools in the garage, so I slipped down there after putting on some clothing. I discovered a strong wooden stake there. I went back to my room and took out a piece of thick cardboard, the sort that comes with brand new dress shirts, from my closet. I carefully wrote "for sale" in large, strong letters with a red marker. I then filled a bag with necessities like clothing and toiletries. I had previously located a vacant motel in the area. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and reasonably priced for a few days as I considered my options. I sneaked out the front door, attached my improvised for sale sign, and drove the stake into our front grass. It was challenging because the ground was partially frozen, but I was strengthened by my will. When it was safe, I took a step back to inspect it. Seeing those words for some reason made my choice seem true. Without turning around, I got into my car and drove off. The majority of the guests had departed after Christmas, so the hotel was quiet. After checking in and carrying my suitcase to the room, I finally took a deep breath. I sat on the bed and reflected on what I had just done while turning on the TV for background noise. My phone blew up 3 hours later. The calls came first, Greg, Mom, and even Amber. Then came the flood of text messages. "Why is this sign on our yard, Robin?" It was Mom's first text. "Give us a call back right now," Greg demanded. Until the count hit 20, I chose to disregard them all. Missed phone calls. I then wrote a single concise message. "I own the house. I'm fed up with the way you all handle me. I made the decision to sell it and purchase a flat close to my place of employment. You ought to begin your search for a new residence. Right now, I don't want to see any of you." Mom's reaction was instantaneous. "This cannot be done to us. We also call this place home. What are we meant to do then? You are being avaricious and unkind, following everything that we have done for you." That made me chuckle out, and I shut off my phone. I needed time to me free from their manipulation, guilt, and trips. There was an odd limbo during the week between Christmas and New Year's. I continued to stay at the motel, disregarding the increasing volume of missed messages and calls. I located a short-term rental apartment on January 2nd and transferred my few possessions there. The next thing I did was call a lawyer. I located property law expert Thomas Harrington and made an appointment for a consultation. After I recounted my circumstances, he remarked, "You inherited the house from your father when you were 18. Right, indeed. In addition, I utilized a little sum of money to cover my property taxes." He took notes while nodding. "And you've been making a substantial contribution to home expenditures and paying the utilities since he returned at the age of 22. Indeed. Around 70% of total household expenses. Additionally, you and your mother never had a formal renting agreement. No, nothing is documented." Thomas reclined in his seat. "Legally speaking, Miss Coleman, you have a solid case. The property is all yours. Without a lease, you have been paying your utilities and taxes. In a sense, your mother and her family are visitors in your house. That I may request that they go. Of course. We can draft an eviction notice that will give them a fair amount of time to leave. In situations like these, 2 weeks is typical. We can engage the police if they don't cooperate." I felt a wave of relief. "Come on, let's do it." That day, we wrote the notice of eviction. It was a direct and official donation. Mom and Greg have only 14 days to leave the property. To make sure they couldn't say they never got it, Thomas recommended sending it via certified mail. Mom called 3 days later. I nearly didn't respond, but I felt compelled to. With a strained voice, she said, "We need to talk." I consented to meet on neutral territory, a cafe downtown. Mom and Greg were already sitting at a corner table when I got there. Mom had crimson rims around her eyes. Greg seemed uneasy. "This eviction cannot be taken seriously." When I sat down, Mom said, "I mean it." With tears in her eyes, she added, "But we have nowhere to go." "You can't locate a place and move in 2 weeks. Before ordering me to vacate my own home on Christmas Day, you ought to have given it some consideration." Calmly, I answered. Greg bent over. "Look, we were angry, Robin. Things were stated that weren't appropriate. You are free to return home. We will no longer even request funds for the bills." I gave a headshake. "For that, it is too late. You expressed your emotions clearly." Mom broke down in tears. "You're being so mean now. Following all I've done for you, including raising and taking care of you. I'll bring you before the judge. I'll sue you for all of the expenses I incurred when you were a college student." I had expected this. I've already spoken to my lawyer about it. "I'll countersue you for 7 years' worth of rent payments for residing in my home if you sue me for all of your debts. In our neighborhood, the average monthly rent is $1,800. It's more than $150,000. Tell me, please." Her face was devoid of color. Without saying another word, she snatched up her bag and hurried out. As I paid the bill and made my way to my car with Greg right behind me, I came to the realization that this was no longer about winning or losing. It was about defending myself and realizing my value. I'd let them take advantage of me for far too long, making me feel like the selfish one for setting limits. The following 2 weeks flew by. I devoted my evenings to researching local real estate valuations and house renovations while I put myself into my profession during the day. I wanted to receive the most money for the house if I ever decided to sell it. On the day of the eviction, my attorney Thomas proposed that he come to the residence with me, in case it became difficult. I concurred. Thank you for your support. At precisely 10 in the morning, we drew up to the curb. There was a moving truck in the driveway partially loaded with boxes and furniture. Jason, Mom, Greg, and Amber were all outside loading their things. They froze when they saw my automobile. Anger solidified into a mask on Mom's face. Greg wrapped her shoulders in his arm. Jason and Amber gave me blatantly hateful looks. As we got closer, Thomas replied, "Good morning. Our goal is to make sure the eviction goes forward as mandated by law." "We are leaving," Greg replied sharply. "The legal muscle is not required. Until we find a solution, we have been renting an apartment across town on a month-to-month basis." I gave a nod. "I'll be in my car waiting. Tell me when you're finished, please." I turned to go. Mom yelled, "Your father would have wanted this, right? For you to abandon your family on the streets." "Robin." I paused and turned to her. "Dad wanted me to be safe and surrounded by unconditionally loving people. The lady you become would be unrecognizable to him." She flinched. However, I took no pleasure in her suffering. For the next 3 hours, we were just sorry about what we had lost. I saw people live their lives piece by piece as I sat in my automobile, books, clothing boxes, appliances, and furniture. Every now and again, Thomas would come to see how things were doing and make sure they weren't stealing anything from the home itself. Before Thomas and I entered the house, we waited until the moving truck and their vehicles had driven off down the street. I prepared myself for what I may discover. It was worse than I thought it would be. They had taken as much as they were legally allowed to take. Every appliance was gone. Stove and refrigerator, dishwasher, dryer, and washer. The keys were on the kitchen counter, as Greg had mentioned, and there was exposed wire where the bathroom light fixtures had been taken out. The toilet paper holders, towel racks, and shower heads had all been stolen. As Thomas noted on his clipboard, they've stripped the place. Some of this could go too far and cause property damage. I cataloged the damage in what had been my bedroom as I went through each room. In Amber's room, they pulled out a piece of carpet. Shelving had been torn out, leaving gaps in the walls. I had admired the chandelier in the dining room since I was a youngster, but it was gone. "Would you like to take additional legal action?" Thomas inquired. "We may argue for compensation." After giving it some thought, I shook my head. "No. All I want is for this to end." I took a seat on the bottom step of the stairs after Thomas had departed. With all the furniture gone, this was the last remaining spot to sit. There was a strange hush in the house, a thick, oppressive silence. I had prevailed, in a technical sense. My home was back. How come I felt so empty then? My buddy Kayla texted me and my phone buzzed. "How was it? Do you want me to visit?" I answered. After half an hour, Kayla showed up with Chinese cuisine, a bottle of wine, a portable speaker, and takeaway. Spiritual first aid? After putting everything on the kitchen floor, she made the announcement. We sat cross-legged on the bare floor and ate straight from the containers. "What comes next then?" First, she inquired in between modest primary repairs. I mentioned that I had previously contacted contractors to get prices for the necessary appliances, plumbing, and electrical work. After that, I'll choose to sell or stay. "What about your mother?" I let out a sigh. "I'm not sure. A part of me wishes I would never talk to her again. She misses her former self in another way." Kayla gave a nod. In an understanding manner. "You are not required to make a decision today or even this year." Soft music played in the background as we completed supper and opened the wine. I discussed my restoration ideas with them as we went through each room. New flooring and new paint. Fixtures that have been updated. Making the house a home again. My house. Kayla said, "It's going to be beautiful and yours alone." I slept on a blow-up mattress in my former bedroom that night. I slept better than I had in months despite the pain. It's time to stop being cautious. No more feelings of guilt. I will no longer feel like an intruder in my own house. The dawn was beaming through my own curtained windows when I woke up the next morning. I sat on the window seat and used a camping kettle that Kayla had lent me to make a cup of instant coffee. As I woke up and gazed out at the neighborhood, they couldn't handle the one thing about my room. For the first time in a long time, I felt anything. I hoped for myself as well as the house. I poured myself into remodeling over the following few weeks. After Mealy appliances arrived, electricians fitted ceiling fans and light fixtures and plumbers repaired the bathroom fittings. I selected the paint colors, flooring, cabinet, hardware samples, and other elements that would reclaim this space as my... I kept the for sale sign up on the yard to remind people that this was my decision, not because I was in a rush to sell. Right now, if I wanted to, I could sell. If I wanted to, I could remain. I made the choice alone for once. Mom made one call. I left it on voicemail at this period. Her message started Robin. She spoke in a tiny, unsure voice. "You are missed. Would you please let us talk?" I didn't answer the phone, but I did send the message. I might be prepared to re-establish that relationship at some point. Not yet, though. As spring dawned and brought fresh life to the garden that Dad had loved so much, I had to first rebuild myself. I came to the realization that I wasn't quite ready to leave this area. These walls housed far too many memories, both priceless and heartbreaking. I removed the for sale sign and replaced it with flowers. Story 3. Daniel is my name. I'm 34 years old, and I've always been the family's quiet kid. Unlike my brother Jason, I wasn't flamboyant or rebellious. Furthermore, I didn't make an effort to convince anyone of anything. I just tried to be there for others, especially my parents when they needed me, worked hard, and kept my head down. Jason and I were just 2 years apart in age while we were growing up, but you wouldn't know it from the way we were treated. He had a bright grin, was the golden boy, and was impervious to wrongdoing, even when he was obviously making mistakes. At 19, he crashed his father's automobile. Boys will be boys. Failed to graduate from college. All he needs is time to discover his passion. To help pay for my textbooks, I acquired a part-time job when I was 16. I was advised I needed to be more proactive, but I didn't focus on that. Then no. I believed that I would gain my spot if I simply continued to be dependable, show up and lend a hand. I got a good career in IT after graduation. Stable, but nothing outrageous. Even though I wasn't making millions of dollars, I could live on my own and occasionally even assist my parents. By now, too. Then, I paid for their internet every month for years. Every Sunday without fail, their utilities assist with roof repairs. I would stop by with some groceries. They had stopped asking for it altogether. It simply become the norm. A few food bags, a few necessities, and my assistance with little household tasks. Jason, on the other hand, takes a breath every few months and tells a dramatic tale about his girlfriend or his most recent business venture. Make your parents very happy, then vanish once again when things get too real. I didn't voice any complaints. I didn't say it out, but it got to me. The little dicks, the passive remarks, well, that spark has always been there in Jason. Whether you like it or not, everyone is supposed to be ostentatious. Some folks are simply more helpful than others. I didn't mind at all. They were from a different generation, I assured myself, and their statement meant nothing. That perhaps, just possibly, they might one day recognize everything that I had done for them. The moment that broke something inside of me then came. Mom gently brought it up in conversation over tea on a Saturday afternoon in April. No preparation, no fanfare, just a gentle, almost joyous, "Oh, when we completed our will last week. Doesn't that feel good?" I blinked. "Oh, that's excellent. I'm glad you're taking care of everything." As if trying to recall, she nodded and slowly stirred her tea. If she added sugar? Indeed, Jason was left in charge of everything, naturally. It makes the most sense. He has plans and is the oldest, actual goals. At first, I wasn't even sure what to say. I laughed because I was certain I had misheard, not because it was funny. "Hold on, is everything in the house? The savings, the car?" Without even looking at me, she nodded once more. "Mom, it's just simpler that way. You're doing fine on your own. You don't really need anything from us," that word need. It hit me harder than I expected. Like the past 15 years of unpaid bills and grocery bags and roof repairs meant nothing. Because I wasn't the one with a sob tale or a spotlight. I never asked them for a thing. I believed that meant they respected me. Turns out it just made me invisible. I remained calm, not straight away. I went home, sat in my flat, gazed at the ceiling for a while. My fridge still contained leftovers from their Sunday grocery run. The internet I pay for had just gone up $5 a month and I hadn't even blinked. I thought about every tiny thing I'd done every time I valued their comfort above mine. Then I accessed my bank app and started making changes. First went the vehicle pay for their utilities. Then the grocery budget. I erased the repeating reminder I had set Sunday parents' grocery. I didn't announce anything. I said nothing at all. I simply quit. 3 weeks passed. I was expecting a call, but I didn't get one. Not until around 7:42 p.m. on a Wednesday night. Dad texted me and my phone exploded. Not even a greeting. No. How are you? The electricity was suddenly cut off. You neglect to make the payment? I gazed at the display. I didn't understand for a moment that he actually believed I had forgotten, as if they were no longer even in charge of the utilities. I typed erased and then typed once more. It was brief. 5 words. Not at my residence. I wish you luck. I became acutely aware of their entitlement at that point. I wasn't taken for granted by them. Around it, they had constructed a whole system, a structure in which I served as the support staff and Jason as the visionary, where my efforts were never truly mine to provide, hence they didn't deserve appreciation. Like breathing, they were to be anticipated. It was interesting to hear the quiet following the text. No follow-up, don't apologize. Not even a thumbs up for passive aggression. Until the groceries ran out, there was nothing. I went for a stroll the next Sunday. There was no sun, the chirping of birds. It was quiet yet odd not having to carry paper bags into their kitchen. Liberation. I finally found myself in a small cafe on the corner. For once, I ordered a good breakfast for myself. Bread, eggs, and non-saleable orange juice. My phone buzzed once more while I was eating. It was Mom this time. It's grocery day. Only those 2 words were written by her. Not a reminder, not a question. More akin to a prompt, as though I had just forgotten where I was. I didn't respond. I left it alone. She phoned the following day. I didn't respond. She sent another SMS 2 days later. We're running low on everything, but I understand that you're busy. Would you be able to stop by again? Nothing. Jason eventually gave me a call that Friday. At that point, things began to take a different direction than I had anticipated. You didn't shout at me or accuse me. No, he made a terrible attempt, being sensible. His voice was as seductive as ever when he continued, "Look, man, Mom and Dad are becoming older, yet I know they can be a lot. They require assistance. That's what you've always been good at." I stared out my window while leaning against the kitchen counter. Jason, they left you everything. Everything. So why don't you take the initiative? The other person paused as if he hadn't expected me to say that out. Finally, he stated, "It's not about the will. It all comes down to doing what is right." I almost burst out laughing. It's funny. I have spent the last 10 years doing just that. He let out a sigh. This has nothing to do with money. I'm not. I said. I meant it too. It's about respect, I'm saying. I'm also respecting myself for the first time in my life. That was our final conversation, for the time being. However, it didn't end there. Because I had a knock on my door a few days later, and I felt sick to my stomach as I opened it. It was a type of incredulity that hadn't worn off, but not out of guilt. My father was standing there looking unkempt and carrying a bag of melted goods. He appeared older than I had recalled. In that subtle, uneasy sensation that life had begun to wear him down, and he wasn't sure how to deal with it rather than in a spectacular fashion like time has passed. In addition to not barking my name as he occasionally did, his stance was less rigid as normal. He simply held that flimsy shopping bag in front of him as if it were evidence that he was still somewhat dignified. He said, "Hey," only that I remained silent. I didn't step aside, but I kept the door open. He shifted the bag in his hands and moaned, "I was unaware of the type of milk you consume. The entire thing. It's still acceptable." Then it struck me. He believed that a bag of groceries would make up for years of neglect, or at the very least reimburse him for the unpaid labor I had ceased providing. He believed this to be some sort of peace offering. I remained motionless. "Would you like to enter?" I asked bluntly. I wanted to see where this was going, not because I was feeling warm. He nodded and entered the apartment clumsily, as if it were a different apartment than the one he used to enter at will. Placing the bag on the kitchen counter, he stood with his hands in his pockets, feigning admiration for the location despite having seen it dozens of times. "Nice," he said. "Tidy." I gazed at him. "Dad, why are you here?" He gave me the impression that I had just asked a very difficult question. Your mom's. She's not pleased about the wolf issue, though. She didn't anticipate your level of annoyance. My eyebrows went up. She didn't think I would be upset about inheriting me. He looked away and rubbed his jaw. It wasn't intimate. Who was it about then, I inquired. Because it would have been about effort, fairness, or who actually shows up. Don't claim that you felt Jason was more deserving of everything than I was. Quiet. I left it alone. He let out another sigh. This time heavier. We figured he'd need it more. You've always been solid, responsible. You make do. Jason still finding his footing. I wanted to scream that word again. Need. Like I was a backup generator that didn't need maintenance, because I never failed. Because I functioned. That's the problem, I said quietly. You confuse reliability with not needing love, with not needing respect. He looked down. We didn't mean for it to come off that way. I leaned against the wall, arms folded. That's the thing, Dad. It didn't come off that way. It is that way. You wrote it down, signed it, had it notarized. He glanced at the bag on the counter. The power's back, but barely. We had to shift some items around. I nodded. Excellent. That's what adults do. He blinked at me. That's it then. You're just done. That was the moment. Right there where the whole weight of it hit him, that I wasn't bluffing. That the years of my being the backup, the silent helper, the dutiful son who never asked for anything, that version of myself didn't live here anymore. I didn't respond. I just strolled up to the bag he brought, took out the milk, and slipped it into my fridge without a word. The hush in the room increased. He glanced about like he didn't know where to go from here. This was unexpected, he said. Speak quietly. No, I answered, looking him in the eyes. Because you believed I would be too apprehensive to quit, too devoted, too appreciative, or too submissive, you expected me to continue doing everything for you for free indefinitely. You didn't refute it. Then I noticed it, for a moment only. Something flickered in his face that wasn't guilt or humiliation. Fear was the cause. He recognized I had something he didn't, which is why I wasn't upset. Limitations. The doorbell rang. I scowled as I brushed by him to respond to his surprised expression. Jason was standing there with his hair done just so. He had on sunglasses. His sleeves were pulled up as if he had just left a lunch meeting with an investor he hadn't really scheduled. Hey, he replied, grinning effortlessly. You were being obstinate, according to Dad. I tightened my jaw. You're joking. He raised his hands. See, I understand. You're angry. Correctly. However, family doesn't work like this. Family? I crossed my arms as I spoke. It's funny. I was unaware that I had included his family. Jason entered the house without permission. As usual, he glanced around the room and flopped down on my couch as if he owned it. Man, hurry up. It's only paperwork. It is possible to alter the world. The important thing is that we proceed. I closed the door more slowly than I had to in order to proceed. I said it again. I did everything for years while you dressed up and played business, calling it ambition. Jason's laughter was too loud. Things are usually taken so personally by you. Dad crossed his arms and hovered behind me. Can't we all just get together and discuss this like grown-ups? Something inside of me clicked at that moment. Something icy serene and definitive. I said, I'm an adult. That's the distinction. For a long time, I have been one. I just refuse to be treated like a child by you. Jason's tone changed significantly as he leaned forward. Now what? You interrupted us. Do you truly want to be someone like that? I went over, took out the milk they had provided, and opened the refrigerator. Are you curious about my personality? I asked, setting the milk down again and giving them each a direct look. The type of person who is aware of his value, who endured years of being treated like an afterthought, and who at last came to the realization that someone does not necessarily deserve your allegiance simply because they have your last name. I interrupted Jason just as he was about to protest. You thought I would give in when you came here today. You believed that everything could be undone with a grin and a bag of groceries. However, it's too late. Dad stepped forward. That's it then. That was the only time I nodded. Then I did something they didn't anticipate. I opened the door because they no longer belonged here, not because I was throwing them out in a big, showy manner. Not in my personal area. In my life, no. Jason slowly got to his feet. This is something you'll regret. No, I said. You will. With a final glance, Dad seemed to want to say something, but he chose not to. He simply followed Jason out. Silently, the door behind them closed. And the ensuing stillness didn't seem like punishment for the first time in my adult life. It was peaceful. After that encounter, the days were eerily quiet. You would think there would be some significant repercussions if you cut off your brother and parents in the same afternoon. Perhaps whispering neighbors. Family members are phoning, a backlash of some sort. However, none of that was present, nothing but quiet. And for a time, I was on the verge of believing that perhaps they had received the message. Perhaps it sank in. Perhaps they were gathered around that chilly, shadowy dwelling. They lost the ability to manage without my knowledge. Naturally, though, it would have been too simple. It began quietly. Old aunts and uncles with whom I had little communication, as well as a couple of my shared family acquaintances, began to enjoy Jason's ambiguous theatrical Facebook posts. For example, some people would rather destroy relationships than be present when things count. And you forget who most needs you when you're the one helping them all the time. Clueless, euphoric nonsense that only made sense if you already knew the entire story. Then the messages arrived. One evening, I received an unexpected message from my cousin Anna. Hello. I have heard that there is some conflict inside the family. Is everything all right? It was brief. Space was all that was required. She followed up with a thumbs up. I hope it goes well. Your parents adore you, I know that. The section that hurt more than it should have was that one. They adore you, perhaps. However, love without respect isn't the kind of love that counts, not when blind partiality and circumstances are involved. My mother called me by the second week. I didn't answer. There was no voicemail left by her, it was just a missed call. The next day, a message. You have not contacted us. I hope your anger has subsided. Still angry, as if I had lost my temper, as if I were pouting, not getting back what had been gradually taken away from me. More than 10 years. I didn't answer. I put all of my energy into my own life instead. I began modestly by tidying my flat and enrolling in a cooking class that I had previously been unable to attend due to my hectic schedule. I even went to the seashore for a weekend. Since I had always planned my time and finances around my family's demands, I hadn't done this in years. I also began to recall what it was like to live for myself, but the tranquility was short-lived. Not for very long. I received a letter in the mail around 3 weeks following the altercation. Not rubbish, not a bill. My name was scribbled on a formal envelope in the meticulous, clean handwriting my mother normally used for Christmas greetings. There was a note inside. No love, Daniel, my beloved. Parents, only this. We can understand if this is how you would like things to be. But remember, family endures forever, and you'll have to live with the way you treated us once we're gone. I read it 3 times. It nearly made me chuckle. It was there. The blackmail of emotions. It's not an apology. Not a nod. A last-ditch effort to humiliate me into returning to service. To make me feel bad for prioritizing myself. What about the irony? I hadn't been unkind to them. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't exposed them on social media. I just quit making sacrifices for folks who just considered me a fallback option. I spent some time looking at that letter. I didn't discard it. I also didn't keep it. In case I ever needed the reminder, I put it back in the envelope and put it in a folder called Family at the back of my file cabinet. I ran into Mrs. Kaplan, an old neighbor from the block where I grew up that weekend, while I was in the local market. Even though it had been years, she recognized me right away. Danny. Her voice was like sunshine as she spoke. Oh my God, take a look at yourself. We spent a few minutes catching up and engaging in small talk. She then inquired about my parents' well-being. I paused. They're working it out. I spoke slowly. She looked at me oddly. I ran into your mother last week, you know. She informed me that you had been aloof recently and that you were going through something. I told her. In any case, he has always been the glue that holds everything together. Let the boy rest. That made me grin. As always, Mrs. Kaplan had observed more than she said. I was surprised by what she said next, though. She also brought up the subject of selling the house, claimed that Jason would take care of everything. Selling the house made my heart slow down. Mrs. Kaplan gave a nod, said they were unable to pay the invoices on time, that Jason knew someone in real estate. She seemed anxious. For a time, I stood there taking it all in. Property wasn't all that my parents' house was. It had roots, history, and recollections. Jason was now in charge of selling it, even though he hadn't contributed a single dime to it. I walked home more quickly than I intended to, thanked her, and said my courteous goodbyes. I entered, took a seat, and began to dig. Public property listings and real estate records. What might validate what I just heard? And only 2 days ago it was listed. Charming family home with potential sold as is was the description for a modest 3-bedroom house on Hawthorne Lane. For further information, get in touch with Jason. That must have been their plan since I gazed at it. They didn't reduce or find out how to budget when I became useless. They just gave Jason everything once more. The same Jason who had failed at every business he had ever launched. The same Jason who criticized me for finally establishing limits and calling me ungrateful and obstinate. I had assisted him in maintaining the house for more than 10 years, and now he was selling it. The icing on the cake, the pictures. The kitchen had recently been renovated. Repainted cabinets and a new backsplash indicated that they had enough money to make the property appear appealing to potential buyers. Simply put, they didn't want to spend money on food or bills, not when they still thought I would continue to do it. However, they had already damaged that bridge and they were about to discover something that they ought to have known long before. They may have presented Jason as the public face, the favorite, the visionary, the spark. However, I was the only one who truly understood the situation. The one who listened, who documented, who was aware of the legal pitfalls they heedlessly entered while expecting I would never object. Furthermore, I wasn't going to let him sell that house easily, particularly not after they had written me against my will. I started making plans at that point after opening my personal file cabinet and taking out a folder titled Maintenance Receipts. Over the course of the following 48 hours, I went through every email document and folder I had. But not because I'm being petty. Sure, it helped fuel the engine, but I had years' worth of utility bills, food logs, contractor receipts, bank statements, and even the contract I signed when I gave my parents $10,000 to replace their roof. It was informal at the time. Because you never know, it's just something to have on paper. And at dinner, we chuckled about it. That paper was gold today, though. Until the day you stop, most people don't consider what it means to be the one holding things together. It isn't until you let go and everything comes apart that they understand how many threads you are holding. That was not what Jason had anticipated. My parents hadn't either. The next morning, I sent a straightforward email outlining the circumstances to a real estate lawyer. My parents were trying to sell their home, which I had helped them maintain and support financially for more than 10 years. I made it plain that I wasn't attempting to assert ownership after they had thrown me out of their will entirely, but rather that I was contesting the terms of the contract since my financial contribution wasn't a gesture of goodwill. It was predictable, consistent, and methodical. Basically, they were going to find out what happens when your investor speaks up if they intended to treat me as a quiet investment. The attorney got back to me in a matter of hours. I had a cause to contest the sale profits legally on the grounds of equitable interest not to own the home. I had evidence of my financial contributions, utility payments, maintenance coverage, and the $10,000 loan for the roof in particular. I can temporarily stop the sale by filing a notice of interest, he stated. It will compel the parties to respond legally, but it won't permanently halt it. Leverage is what that implies. I gave a nod, allowing the remarks to gain momentum. The notification was filed by the end of the week. My phone rang less than 48 hours later. Jason was the one. What did you file? He lost his temper. No pretense, no greeting, an announcement of interest. Calmly, I said, "This is an official notification that I own a portion of the property. You must be joking with me." "I'm not," he said with a sour laugh. "You believe that I interfered because you purchased a few bags of food for 15 years. I handled emergencies, food upkeep, and utilities for 15 years. While you were away in Miami feigning to launch a tech firm." He fell silent. I stated that I wasn't doing this to steal the house. I took this action to make a point and ensure that you couldn't stealthily sell the family home after excluding me from every decision, plan, and dollar. He murmured, "This is petty." "No, you would have been left with the ashes of Jason Petty's garage fire. This is my way of keeping you accountable at last." He didn't bid farewell. He ended the call. My mom sent me the following message. "Daniel, I have no idea what you're doing. You're not this person." It's funny what people say when they're suddenly irritated. As if the degree to which I can put up with it defines who I am. However, that was its beauty. For the first time in years, this was me. I stopped taking crumbs to maintain the peace and started acting like someone who cared and deserved better. They then requested to meet after nearly a month of quiet. Not Jason. My folks. They didn't call or write another letter filled with guilt. Just as previously, they arrived at my door. However, they were not carrying groceries this time. They lacked a smile. They weren't arrogant either. Slowly, I opened the door. My dad appeared to have had a rough night's sleep. My mom had swollen eyes. Uncertain whether they were going to be expelled or pardoned, they stood there like children waiting before a principal's office. We must speak. I didn't invite them in, according to my dad. I went outside, leaned on the railing, and closed the door. I would want to begin. My mother said softly. She shook her voice. I made a mistake. For years, Daniel, you have been nothing but kind to us, and we simply thought you would always be there. Because I was constantly... I said. She gave a nod. That's the problem. We stopped noticing because you were so dependable. I saw her see my father observing her and the will. I inquired. Then Dad took over. It wasn't our intention to penalize you. We simply assumed Jason required further assistance. You were mistaken. He let out a sigh. Now we can see that. I let the quiet to linger between us. I didn't want any more excuses. I'd like to change. The will be updated. Split things fairly, Mom urged. They'll involve you. I arched an eyebrow. 50. 50. She paused. I said, we were thinking more like 50-50. I ensure that every buyer gets the whole breakdown of my financial participation in the legal notice posture. Each and every dime. My father took a deep breath. 50. 50. Jason is no longer involved after I gave him a single nod. The house is not sold by him. If I don't approve the terms, he doesn't profit. They exchanged glances. It was visible to me. Fear and remorse lie behind the pride that still clings to the surface, and something more akin to respect than any of them had ever shown me. The three words I thought I would never hear were spoken by my mother as she turned around to face me. Daniel, you're correct. And that's it. The tide shifted. The will was revised. A different attorney examined and notarized the paperwork for me. The sale of the house was put on hold indefinitely while I made a decision. Jason attempted to object, attempted to use guilt tripping to get our parents to support him once more. They didn't flinch this time, though, because you learn not to risk losing your most reliable guy again after you've lost him once. And me, my motivation was not retaliation, not at all. I did it because, in their opinion, I had lost my humanity somewhere along the line. I turned into a resource. A walking credit card with a consistent Sunday routine and a soft voice. However, it is no longer the case. I'm currently living in the tranquility I created for myself. Even though I no longer spend Sundays in someone else's kitchen, I still go for walks. I prepare meals for myself. I make an investment in myself. I purchase milk from my refrigerator, not to keep lights on for other people. Tell me your thoughts on all of this. Story 4. This Easter, you're not welcome, my mother muttered. All right, but don't count on my $9,800. I stated as I turned off their home's internet, water, and power. Stay out of here. When my mother answered the door, they were the first words she uttered. No grin, no embrace. No honey, happy Easter. The breath left my lungs after hearing only 3 calm, flat words. With a basket of handcrafted chocolate eggs in one hand and a glass of wine in the other, I stood on the porch. Even the pale blue blouse she liked was mine. My eyes widened at the one she stated. That's what she used to say proudly. She refused to even look at me now. What I blinked. Are you serious? After taking a quick look behind her, my mom went outside and shut the door nearly completely. Only a little portion was exposed as if I posed a threat. She muttered, "It would be better if you didn't come in today." Around me, the air froze. To get here, I drove 3 hours. I understand, she responded, her voice still low. However, Olivia stated she wouldn't come if you were present and things are tight. Naturally. Olivia. I ought to have realized she was responsible for this. She was always. Through the clinking of wine glasses, I heard laughter. Cheers to real family being together, was shouted by someone who was most likely Uncle James. Then I heard Olivia's sweet, booming voice. To be honest, it feels very calm this year. No drama, no negativity. I didn't shout even though I wanted to. I simply grinned serenely. That smirk that screams, "You don't know what's coming." What do you know? Taking out my phone, I said. All right, have a restful Easter, but don't count on my $9,800 anymore. My mother's expression changed. Bewildered, she blinked. How much money? Slowly, she asked. I gave her a direct look. The internet, the water, and the electricity. The monthly costs for this residence that I have been paying. The services. You claim to need it. Only until Dad is able to stand again. You know what? I just turned them off even though they are in my name. Her mouth parted, then shut again. She became pallid. What? You kept it from me. You didn't. I cocked my phone. Have you seen this app? Just a single tap? I touched the screen with my thumb. From within, the lights go out. Olivia's yelling caught my attention. Just now the Wi-Fi went down. What was that, Mom? I took a step back, but I had lunch for the phone. Happy Easter, I said. I walked back to my car after turning. Nobody trailed behind. I was sitting behind the wheel and nobody apologized. Olivia appeared at the doorway behind my mother, holding her phone high and her cheeks flushed. Are you insane? We were going to lunch, I shouted back and rolled down the window. Give your actual family a call. Next month they might pay the bills. I then took off in my car. Not guilty. No second thoughts. At that point, I ceased to be their personal utility company and turned into a ghost they could no longer take advantage of. I used to convince myself that I was the one who was responsible and that I was helping. That family required sacrifice. I made a lot of promises to myself, like when I was in the middle of a meeting and my dad phoned. Powers are shutting off, he stated frankly. Again, when I stepped out into the hallway and whispered, only for a few days. I'll send it back by Friday if you can cover it, he added. I paid him nonetheless, and he never returned it. As usual. I have a lengthy family history of being taken without asking. I've been allowing them for a while. I took over to help with the utilities when Dad lost his job 3 years ago. Mom became insecure when she needed a dental procedure that wasn't urgent. When Olivia couldn't afford to renew her car lease, I took care of it. I paid the first 6 months and co-signed the new one. It felt good at first. I was the one who had it together, the one who could be trusted. But gradually that awe evolved into anticipation. First entitlement, then contempt. You're very fortunate not to have children. At dinner, Olivia would say, you own all of your money. It must be pleasant. Are you referring to the funds I utilize to settle your bills? I answered once. Oh, please, she laughed. Don't make it seem like a charity. Do you enjoy feeling better than others, Mom added. That wasn't how she meant it. No, I meant exactly that, Olivia said, smirking. You pay a few bills, so you think we should bow down. A couple of bills? Let's talk about a couple bills. Water, $83 per month. Electricity, $210 per month. Internet, $89 per month. Streaming. Mobile plans. Random Amazon orders. I stopped counting. I checked my bank app last month and realized I'd spent $9,800 in the last 12 months alone. And yet to them I was still the bitter, selfish brother who never smiled. And family photos. The worst part, I wasn't even surprised anymore. A few weeks ago, I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I came by the house unannounced to drop off some groceries and heard laughter from the kitchen. He's so uptight, Olivia said. You think paying a few bills made him king of the world, Mom added. He's probably just lonely, Dad chimed in. He works too much. All that money and no one to spend it on. At least he's good for something, Olivia said. I'd cry if I had to pay my own internet. They all laughed. I stood frozen on the porch, grocery bags in hand. No one saw me. I turned and left without saying a word. Later that night, I canceled the auto pay on their Netflix and Disney+. Olivia texted the next day. Did the Wi-Fi glitch or did you forget to pay again? I didn't reply. But the real breaking point came 2 months ago. I logged into my bank account to transfer money and noticed something strange. Multiple Apple Pay purchases. I didn't recognize a new MacBook. A wellness retreat, subscriptions, designer clothes, all billed to the card I'd once given my mom just in case of emergencies. I called her immediately. Did you buy a MacBook? Oh, that was for Olivia. She needed one for work and a retreat. She was going through a rough patch. Honestly, she was crying every night with my money. She got quiet. You make more than all of us combined, she said softly. It's not like you can't afford it. I hung up without a word for days. I debated whether to confront them, but then I remembered something Olivia had said during last Thanksgiving. We all play our roles. Mine is being fabulous. Yours is paying for the turkey. She laughed. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile and swallowed my pride. But now I couldn't even look at a turkey without wanting to scream. Easter was supposed to be the one time of year where we all pretended to care about each other. I bought gifts for the kids, booked time off work, even made reservations for Sunday brunch a week before I got a text from Mom. Hey, sweetie, could you make sure the utility payments are squared away before the weekend? Olivia's hosting an egg hunt at the house. I didn't respond, but I paid $385 for their comfort, $0 in gratitude. And then Easter came. I showed up with wine and chocolate, and they shut the door in my face. This Easter, you're not welcome, my mom said. Olivia made sure I heard it. Honestly, it just feels better without the moodiness, she called from inside. Let's keep it light this year. They wanted light. I gave them darkness, as in no electricity, no water, no internet. I sat in my car and watched the house slowly dim. The porch light flickered off the lawn. Sprinklers stopped. Olivia burst through the front door, 5 minutes later waving her phone like a sword. What did you do? She screamed. I rolled down the window. Enjoy. Easter. I said the way you wanted without me. And I drove off. Finally understanding that sometimes the only way to heal is to cut the cord. I didn't even get it home before the call started. First, Mom and Dad. Then Olivia again. Again. My phone buzzed so violently it almost dropped off the seat. I ignored all of them until one message came in from Dad that made me laugh out loud. You're being theatrical. Come back and correct this. Fix this. You mean your water, your internet, your concept of a functional family. No thanks. They came up at my residence 2 hours later. Despite hearing the knock, I remained still. Give them time to stew. For once, let them experience anything. Then there was a yell. Are you really going to spend Easter ignoring your own mother? We'll contact the cops if you don't open the door now. Olivia let out a scream. This is mistreatment, she raised her voice. Olivia lifted her fist to bang again as I opened the door. She staggered along, almost tripping inside. Enter. Flatly, I replied. However, I'm going to call the police personally if any of you raise your voices. They arrived in droves. Mom is weeping. Dad is pacing. Olivia yelling. Do you find this amusing? We had kids over. Have you ever had to explain the toilet's lack of flush to a 5-year-old? Yes, I sat down and said, you tell them that their uncle and aunt expect me to take care of everything. Boom, keep quiet. Mom let out a gasp. Olivia's gaze widened. Dad's hands clenched. You have no right to talk like way to your family. My mother lost her temper. Family. I arched an eyebrow. The same family who warned me not to go since I destroyed the atmosphere. The same person who made fun of me behind my back for my usefulness. The same one like a refilling tap that took my money. Dad, come on forward. You're going overboard. No. I stated that I had finished reacting. I'm pretending. Olivia crossed her arms at last. Do you believe that this gives you power? Disabling the utilities to make a point. No, I said. I'm free because of this. She gave a snort. You're acting absurdly, to be honest. This martyr complex has always been a part of you. For paying certain payments, do you desire praise? Do you mean my $9? $800 from the previous year? I stole the cash that covered your new iPhone, your heating, your Zoom treatment, and your fictitious business trip to Paris. That turned out to be a Palm Springs spa week. Her face turned pale. You looked through my belongings. You purchased the aircraft ticket using my credit card. Genius. I understand the statements that attempted to shift the topic. Well, let's face it, we've made some errors. A few. I interrupted him. You told me straight out, Dad, that I wasn't welcome at the table. Because Olivia has a future, she deserves the assistance more. He responded softly. You looked me in the eye and said that I was angry. You were honest, I remarked. Mom reached out for once. Please, sweetheart, we are related. Can we simply restart reverse what you did? You didn't simply ignore me this Easter, so I answered icily, no. Years ago, you cut me off. Taking what you need has been all right with you. However, I say no the second time. The villain is me. Olivia was trembling now. She was now quietly angry instead of red-faced. This is something you'll regret. Through her teeth, she said. You think you'll feel better if you cut us off, you'll be by yourself. Excellent. I said. Being alone is preferable to being drained by individuals who greet me with smiles. And when I go spit on my name, quiet. The room was filled with static and a thick electric quiet. Then I got to my feet. This is what will take place. Calmly, I said. You'll pay the utilities in another way. Within 30 days, you will remove the car lease from my name. You will no longer use my Amazon Prime, Spotify, or Netflix. I'll permanently lock everything down if you don't. You wouldn't. Dad got things started. Try me, I said. If you ever try to guilt-trip me again, Mom, please let me know. You are our son. Just keep in mind that sons should be loved, not treated like bills. Mom broke down in tears. Dad, look down, Olivia. She slammed the door so forcefully that a picture frame slanted sideways as she bounded out. I also didn't give a damn. I didn't explain or follow, did not resolve any issues. In my life for the first time. I made no effort to improve it. I let out a breath, locked the door behind them, and shut it. I had finally prevailed in the war. The silence that followed was unbelievable. No texts, no calls, no unexpected raps on the door. It seemed as though they all agreed that I didn't exist. And what do you know? It was a wonderful feeling. I didn't wake up with that drab pressure in my chest for the first time in years. The whisperer. What are they going to require from you today? I will no longer be checking my bank account to see whether I have enough money to handle their most recent emergency. There will be no more phony group conversations where people exchanged memes and left my messages visible. There won't be any more guilt-ridden holidays when I purchased presents for everyone and received socks in exchange. I had freedom. And the quiet. The quiet was beautiful. I started sleeping better, eating better, living better. I bought a cheap second-hand guitar and started teaching myself chords. I reconnected with college friends I hadn't seen in years. I signed up for a photography class just because I'd always wanted to but never had time or energy or space to exist for once. Every cent I earned went toward me, my rent, my groceries, my future. It felt selfish. Then it felt fair. Then it felt right. About a week later, Olivia wrote a big Instagram story rage. Black background, white words, typical passive-aggressive drama dump. Some people may abandon you when you need the most, but God watches everything, and karma is true. I didn't reply, but I did screenshot it for the laughs. A few days after that, Dad phoned. I looked at the screen ringing 5 times, then voicemail. Hey, your mom's unhappy. Olivia's talking about selling her automobile. It's gone too far and I'm not sure why you're doing this. We are related. Give us a call. I did not make a call. I sent Olivia an email instead. The deadline for Carly's transfer forms is 14 days. Subject line, you're welcome. The true surprise then arrived. Suddenly, my cousin's wife, Kelly, reached out. Everything blew apart when she was at the Easter celebration. As Olivia swore and my mother gripped her pearls, as if I had killed someone, I stood silently in the background. Late one evening, she sent me a message. This may seem strange, but I simply wanted to express my gratitude. No one in my family has ever advocated for themselves so strongly in my experience. To be honest, I learned a lot about their treatment of individuals. That wasn't fair to you. I hope all is well with you. For a long time, I simply gazed at the message. It was noticed by someone. At last, someone noticed me. I responded in writing. I'm more than all right. In a long time for the first time. Naturally, though, my family's calm does not continue long. I discovered a message pinned to my flat door when I returned home 2 weeks later. No address for return. My mother's handwritten message was inside. The opening line. This is not how we brought you up. The final one. Our son will always be you, even if the meaning of it has slipped your mind. I split it in two, went out for tacos after throwing it in the garbage. Because this is the problem. They will never comprehend. I never forgot the importance of family. They were unaware. To them, love meant power. That having money meant being obedient. Silence indicated agreement. Your selfless sacrifice demonstrated your dedication, but I knew better at last. It's silent when I enter my own flat now. I wish to keep quiet not because I'm undesired, I light a candle, play some tunes. Breathe when sitting by the window. There are no people waiting for me to fail. Nobody is requesting a wire transfer. And for once, I don't feel like someone else's fallback option. In mine, I feel like the protagonist. Know what's crazy? The world continued to exist. The day I declared to my family that I was finished. The sky remained intact. No lightning, no thunder, bolt of remorse, just freedom and quiet. For someone like me too. Someone who has played the part of a good son his entire darn life. But it was all about the stillness. It wasn't deserted. It was quiet. It wasn't solitary. There was silence. The type of silence that allows your own voice to resurface. Because I was unable to hear my for years. As soon as I woke up, I would begin figuring out who I needed to save that day. Mom required $300 for a short-term petrol expense. Olivia had a concert she couldn't miss, but her account was frozen. If I didn't step in, Dad's late credit card payment would ruin his credit score. I got a bit smaller each time I answered yes. They didn't inquire. They anticipated. They weren't phony. They made jokes. They failed to notice me. They took advantage of me. And since I believed that was how love should feel, I allowed them, suffocating. I mistakenly believed that necessity and want were synonymous. However, it isn't. Being loved is different from being used. That only became clear after a door was slammed and a power line was disconnected. The messages ceased after Easter. No more dangers. Please, no more. No more bow-topped guilt bombs. It seems as though they were too courteous to mention my death. But that ghost face gave me the best perspective I've ever had on my own life. I began asking myself questions that no one had previously permitted. What am I hoping to accomplish? Do I exist outside of them? What if I no longer serve as their lifeline? Do you know what I discovered? Inhale. Space. Joy. I became proficient in cooking for myself. Not cereal and embarrassment, but actual meals. On Saturdays, I joined a nearby music gym. I began penning short stories, poetry. Heck, it turns out that the guilt even extends to an entire individual. Then, weeks after the incident, I happened to run into someone at a bookshop one evening. Rachel was a girl I knew in college. She had changed appearance, more content, lighter. After grabbing coffee and striking up a conversation, she eventually inquired, "Are you still close with your family?" After a moment of hesitation, I responded, It said it for the first time without flinching. "No." I interrupted them. She blinked, then she grinned. "Excellent," I chuckled. I didn't anticipate that. Most folks just look at me as if I've admitted to killing someone. She gave a shrug. Being the family doormat is something that most people have never experienced. We spend hours discussing boundaries, mending, and ultimately making your own decisions without feeling guilty about them. Walking home that evening, I came to the realization that I was no longer broken. Without them, I was starting again, and I was fine with that. Months passed. Little things that held great significance began to catch my attention. My phone ringing no longer made me jump. I stopped looking fearfully at my bank account. I stopped following Olivia on social media in anticipation of the next insult. And I genuinely started giggling at a meme that someone emailed me one day. Like a wave, it struck me. Holy. Well, I'm content. It was because nothing was exhausting me anymore, not because something spectacular had occurred, because I wasn't someone else's crutch for the first time in ages. I was myself, alive. Get up, untangled. The last twist follows. Mom left me a voicemail. She spoke in a delicate, weak, almost frail voice. "Hello, my love. I really hope all is okay with you. Olivia is going through a difficult period. Without you, the home has changed. I am aware of your anger. Even if we made a mistake, you are still our son. You are loved by us. You are missed." I gave the message 2 listens, and I didn't weep for the first time. Nothing drew me back in. I didn't feel angry or guilty. I simply felt finished. As well as the sensation. It wasn't chilly. The temperature was warm. Warm? After years of shade, it seems like standing in the sun. What I now know is as follows. You are not harsh if you say no. It's not a sign of heartlessness to set boundaries. And avoiding harmful individuals. Their blood is survival even if it isn't treachery. Indeed, it's possible that they now use my name as a pejorative at their dinner table. They could fabricate the narrative. Make me the bad guy, the heartless, the ungrateful one. Permit them. I no longer have them in my life, and at last my life is mine. If you're sick of always giving, then this is for you. Never fails to forgive, always makes a sacrifice. Behind your back as they chuckle, I'll be the evidence, feel free to pause. You are free to go on. You have the freedom to select yourself. Additionally, they may tell you that you are not welcome. Good, you say. I came here not to be welcomed. I arrived to halt the bleeding. Then you take a proud stance. Never turn around once you've left, because they don't offer you serenity. When you say enough, that's where you regain control. Story 5. I almost dropped my phone in horror when I saw my mother's name flash over the screen. Her calls were as seldom as eclipses of the sun. In the last 5 years, exactly twice. Once to tell me of Aunt Meredith's passing. Additionally, I casually mentioned that my sister was getting married. I didn't receive an invitation to the wedding, naturally. Hi there, I gave a cautious response. Erica. The tone of her speech remained flat. I recalled. This weekend, your sister Vanessa and her spouse will be in town. They would want you to join them for supper on Friday at 6 o'clock. She hung up after that. I gazed at my mobile device. Even at 30, I still feel like the unwanted kid. I had the option to decline, most likely should have. However, a part of me that still yearned for their acceptance consented to leave. Friday came sooner than I had hoped. I didn't want to bother with parking, so I took a cab. Before long, I was standing in front of my parents' modest suburban house, the same house where I had grown up feeling inconspicuous next to my sister who was my golden child. I knocked on the door after smoothing down my understated yet professional black outfit. No response. I walked inside after testing the handle and discovering it was unlocked. From the dining room came the sound of conversational laughing. It sounded like a big family reunion, not just my sister and dad as promised. Fantastic. More evidence of my never-ending disillusionment. Situation. I observed the same thing when standing at the dining room doorway. At either end of the table are my parents. Every other chair was occupied by Vanessa and her husband, who occupied one side like royalty, and several aunts, uncles, and cousins. My sister was the center of attention. By summer, the second location ought to be operational. Vanessa was saying, making a lot of gestures. Aren't you, honey? Brian's business is just blowing up. Brian. Her husband gave a smug nod. I only knew that he had a car repair shop because cousin Amy would occasionally text me about it. Caleb is already using complete sentences and engaging in family gossip. Vanessa went on mentioning her son, who is 2 years old. He is advanced for his age, according to the pediatrician. My mom grinned proudly. Dad gave a nod of approval. The gathered family members uttered the proper applause. I was still unnoticed. I stood clumsily at the doorway looking around for a seat, but there wasn't one. Normal. Not that I was supposed to remain. Then Vanessa's smile changed as her gaze came to rest on me. It's different, yet still there. Sharper, somehow. Look who has finally made up their mind to join us. With a loud announcement, she called everyone's attention to me. Erica, come on in. For once, sit among successful folks. I grinned to myself but said nothing, and Linda moved her chair over to make room at the table's corner. Squeezing in, I balanced on the seat's edge. Vanessa went on as I was saying. Here in town, we're opening the second location. Brian's going to commute between both stores until he finds a boss he trusts. My parents gladly nodded. I'm really proud, as is your dad. Mom remarked, extending her hand to pat Vanessa's. For yourself, you've done really well. After a minute of reveling in the praise, Vanessa abruptly turned to face me. With a fake sweetness in her voice, she replied, So, Erica, are you still employed at that restaurant as a waitress? There was silence at the table. Everyone looked at me. I had, in fact, begun working as a waitress immediately following high school. My parents claimed to be saving money for Vanessa's schooling. Therefore, they had declined to assist with her college expenses. I had to fend for myself. Yes, I said plainly, still in the same eatery. I didn't go into detail or specify my precise role. Let them make their own assumptions. Then she let forth a sound like glass shattering as she laughed. Erica, you're 30 years old and still carrying plates for tips. You've always been such a failure, God. The family members laughed. My parents nodded in accord and exchanged knowing looks. Instead of feeling offended, I chose to grin to myself. If only they were aware. In fact, Vanessa declared, grabbing everyone's attention with a clap of her hands. There's a reason I brought you all together. Brian and I plan to take everyone out to supper at the city's top restaurant on Saturday of next week to commemorate his accomplishment. It will be incredible. Murmurs of excitement echoed around the table. Everyone appeared happy until Vanessa came around to face me. Except from you, Erica. You're not invited. She had a poisonous smile. Nice. You're too impoverished to attend a family gathering at such a location. You'd be out of place. My mom interrupted before I could reply. Unless, of course, you are a waitress there. At least then you could help us. There was laughing around the table. I could see them all anticipating my response, anticipating pleas, tears, and shame. Rather, I wiped my mouth with a tissue, finished the meal on my plate quietly, and remarked, I would insist you all enjoy yourselves. If they hadn't been my family, their sad expressions would have been hilarious. When it became evident that I would not give them the breakdown of emotions they had hoped for. They didn't care about me for long. The topic of the forthcoming dinner came up again. What they would order and which restaurant they would visit. Where would people sit? I slipped away from the table, grabbed my purse, and called a cab. Nobody saw me go. Nobody bid farewell. I was dropped off at my building, a posh high-rise in the heart of downtown, by the taxi. As I made my way through the marble lobby to the private elevator that took me straight to my penthouse apartment, the doorman called out to me by name. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony as I poured myself a glass of pricey wine and kicked off my shoes. I was still viewed by my family as the unfortunate waitress. The failure of the family. They were unaware of my transformation. I kept thinking about the beginning of it all. I began working part-time at a seedy downtown cafe when I was 16. I had to do it not because I wanted to. I need new jeans, Mom. There are holes in these. One day after school, I begged. She was assisting Vanessa with her science project and hardly looked up. Erica, stop being so demanding. Every time you desire new clothing, we can't afford to buy them for you. While I was still using a flip phone from 3 years ago, Vanessa had the newest iPhone and her closet was overflowing with brand new clothes. So I got the cafe job. The pay was terrible, the hours long, but it meant freedom. I stopped asking my parents for anything. Bought my own clothes, my own phone, my own life. I remember overhearing my mother at a family dinner when I was 17. Erica will probably be a waitress all her life, she told E.T. Linda, she's not bright or gifted like Vanessa at 18. After high school graduation, the ultimate blow came. We can't help with your college fees. My father declared we're saving for Vanessa's schooling. She has enormous promise. That night, I packed my belongings and fled home. I landed a job at a restaurant in the city center. Not prominent, but they recruited everyone willing to work hard. I moved into a tiny apartment with 2 other waiters, Maria and Jen. We barely made ends meet, but at least I was spared from my family's relentless comparisons. I'd see images on social media of Vanessa visiting beach resorts with my parents, or skiing in Colorado, or exploring Europe. Then came the happy announcement of her attending college, the education my parents couldn't afford for me but somehow managed for her. I ignored their ideas and concentrated on my work. Despite having a fantastic downtown position, Bellini's was having financial difficulties. The design was out of date, the cuisine was average, and the service was patchy. However, I never grumbled, studied everything I could, and showed up every day. I paid for my own restaurant management classes at the community college, 1 class at a time during my free time. Marketing techniques, personnel management, engineering menus, and restaurant financing. After working at Bellini's for 2 years, I saw that things were becoming worse. Weekly decline in clientele, increased worker turnover, and food waste. I saw Robert Dawson, the proprietor, sitting by himself with a drink of whiskey one evening after closure, looking at spreadsheets. Mr. Dawson, is everything all right? As I was cleaning tables, I inquired. He let out a deep sigh. Not at all. Erica is considering rebranding or selling. It's dying here. After hesitating, I plucked up the confidence. Rebranding isn't going to help. He jerked his head up. Please pardon me. I'm sorry, but that's reality. Neither the name nor the logo are the issue. The idea itself is the problem. I thought he would become irate, but instead, he pointed to the chair opposite from him. Give me additional details. So I did. I clarified that our chef only created 3 of the 20 previous additions on our menu, which was too long. How then we didn't have the quality to support the costs, despite our best efforts to appear upscale? How our short hours were causing us to entirely miss the lunch crowd. What would you do differently? He inquired about his interest in genuinely concentrating on our strengths. Reduce the menu to a total of 15 items, the ones that people genuinely place orders for. Establish tiers of pricing, provide reasonably priced lunch alternatives and high-end supper options, and launch a delivery service for those who work late in the nearby office buildings. Robert gazed at me. Where did you find out about all of this? For 2 years, I saw this firm lose money while taking management classes at the community college. His laughter was one of astonishment rather than derision. Erica, what is your age? 22. Slowly, Robert nodded. How would you feel about managing Bellini's new restaurant? Assist me in putting these modifications into effect. I need someone who is knowledgeable about this industry's theory and reality. Someone who sees issues and solutions rather than just grievances. After 2 weeks, I had a tiny office of my own and the daunting task of turning a failing restaurant around. It was both thrilling and terrifying. I oversaw a small renovation that gave the establishment a more modern feel while working 18-hour days, redesigning menus, retraining employees, and setting up new procedures. Without being fashionable, Bellamy's headlines went out the door 6 months later. Throughout lunch and dinner, our delivery service was operating continuously. We would increase revenue by 45% while reducing expenses by 30%. We added a second store across town and a third in the financial district within 2 years. Because we had nearly perfected our plan, we were successful right away. Robert invited me to supper on my 24th birthday. Not at one of our eateries, but at the city's most upscale establishment. For you, I have a suggestion. After we placed our purchase, he remarked, I want to make you a partner. 30% of all of our group's restaurants, both present and prospective. My drink almost suffocated me. That is overly giving. It isn't giving. It's business. 3 thriving restaurants have been created out of one failed one by you. Before someone else snatches you away, I would be foolish if I didn't lock you in as a companion. Everything changed that night. I was no longer only a worker. I was a proprietor. After that, we quickly grew, adding 2 additional sites in less than a year. By the time I turned 26, I purchased my condo in a penthouse. I established my own investing portfolio by the time I was 28. Even while my family still believed that I was carrying dishes for tips, I now at the age of 30 managed 8 prosperous restaurants with more than 200 staff members. A notification rang on my phone, bringing me back to the present. Our reservation manager at the original Balinese site, Melissa, sent out a message confirming a large group reservation for next Saturday at 7 p.m. Vanessa Cooper is her name. After looking at the message for a while, I started chuckling. For her large family gathering, my sister had picked my restaurant out of all the ones in the city. That's the party I didn't deserve to be at. I was anxiously anticipating Saturday for the entire week before. I experienced an odd mixture of exhilaration and dread whenever I imagined my family entering my business without realizing it was mine. During our weekly management meeting, Robert observed that I was preoccupied. Is everything all right? When everyone else had left the meeting room, he inquired, You don't seem right today. Over the years, Robert had become into more than just a business associate. He was my buddy, my mentor, and the closest thing I had to family these days. When they realized I had nowhere else to go for holidays, his wife Diane and their children would frequently invite me over. On Saturday, my sister is taking my whole family to Bellini's. I described the first place. He raised his eyebrows. These are the same folks that believe you are still a waiter. The people who didn't extend an invitation to you for dinner? I gave a nod. That's convenient then. A little grin appeared on his face. Will you let them know I'm considering it? Robert reclined on his seat. I've known you for 8 years, Erica. My business has been rebuilt and developed beyond my wildest expectations by you. And aside from those individuals, you have never once requested praise from anybody else. Don't act as though you don't care about this. He was correct. A part of me still yearned for my family's acceptance despite all of my accomplishments, or at the very least, wanted to see their expressions when they saw how mistaken they had been about me. By agreement, I'll be there. When Saturday night finally arrived, I was really anxious. An hour prior to my family's reservation, I arrived to Bellini's to make sure everything was in order. I didn't have to. Although our crew was flawless, it provided me with a task. I put on my executive name badge, which said it all, and a fitted black dress. Owner and Executive Director Erica Mitchell. After that, I waited in my office, which had a glass window that looked out over the main dining area. My parents, Vanessa and Brian. A number of aunts and uncles and a couple of cousins arrived together. There were 14 individuals in all dressed to the nines. I observed the host guiding them to our best table, a big round table in the middle of the dining room that Melissa had reserved without my request. Vanessa was obviously the center of attention as she held court and made ostentatious gestures. My parents nodded in agreement with everything she said, beaming with pride. I felt as though a scene from my early years was being reenacted. I remained in my office until they had placed their appetizer and drink orders. Then, inhaling deeply, I went outside and approached their table slowly. I was first noticed by my cousin Amy. She didn't say anything, but her eyes widened a little. Then the others saw me coming one by one. "Look who it is then." Vanessa made a strong announcement. "Will you serve as our waitress this evening?" "How ideal." Calmly, I grinned. "As a matter of fact, I will not be able to serve you tonight. Too preoccupied with other tables." Brian grinned. "Too busy managing the eatery." I pointed to my name in response. Badge and our group's 7 other members. The ensuing hush was deafening. My mother's jaw dropped. An intriguing hue of crimson appeared on my father's face. Vanessa appeared to have been smacked. "This place is yours." At last, my dad was able to inquire. I checked with Robert Dawson Cohen. "It's been 6 years since we became partners. However, you claim to still be employed at the same eatery." It was uttered accusingly by my mother. "I am. I simply did not state my role." I gave a shrug. "You didn't inquire." The first person to get well was Linda, who had seated me at the family supper. "This is amazing, Erica. The eatery is stunning. You must be really proud." Everyone wanted to talk to me all of a sudden. What had I done? When did this occur? How come I hadn't told them? My cousins appeared to be amazed. My uncles and aunts appeared to be sincere in their interest. The only people who sat in stunned silence were Vanessa, my parents, and my immediate family. "I apologized for disturbing your festivities, but I had to suggest today's special. The truffle risotto costs $80 per plate, but it's really good. It could be a little pricey." As I say this, I look straight at Vanessa, repeating what she said about me being too poor to go. Anger and embarrassment caused her face to flush. Her audience had abandoned her. Everyone's focus was now on me. "I'd better go back to work," I said. "Have fun this evening?" I went back to my office and shut the door. I could see the mess I had left behind through the glass. All of my family members were speaking at once. Every time Brian attempted to talk, Vanessa, who was enraged and red-faced, snapped at him. My folks were in a stupor and kept looking toward my workplace. I should have felt triumphant. This was the moment I'd sometimes fantasized about, the big reveal, the shocked faces, the sudden realization that they'd underestimated me all along. But instead, I felt empty. Their approval or disapproval shouldn't matter anymore. I had built a life without them, succeeded without them. What was I trying to prove? I turned away from the window and focused on my laptop, reviewing plans for our newest location. We were expanding to another city next month, our first venture outside the metropolitan area. There was a ton of work left. An hour later, while my family was finishing their desserts, my office phone rang. It was the host station, Miss Mitchell. "Your parents are requesting to talk with you before they go." I hesitated, then agreed to visit them. They entered my office, cautiously glancing around at the medals on the walls. The framed restaurant reviews, the images of me with Robert at each big opening. "This is extremely amazing, Erica," my father responded stiffly. "Thank you. We'd like to have supper with you someday," my mother said. "At your house. We'd love to see where you reside today." I understood precisely what was occurring. All of a sudden, I was no longer the family failure. I was rich and successful, worth recognizing, worth understanding. "I apologize, but I'm now really busy," I informed my parents. "My whole focus is on opening a new site. Enjoy your evening." The family gathered outside the restaurant after they departed, and I observed from the window of my office. Clearly irritated that her huge celebration had been overshadowed, my sister was making a lot of gestures. My parents appeared to be in astonishment. The other family members continued to stare back at the eatery, presumably still taking in the situation. My parents left me 3 missed calls and a text message asking when we might meet when I woke up the following Sunday. I didn't answer. My mother left a voicemail and 5 more calls on Monday, recommending lunch at whatever place you choose, sweetie. On Tuesday, my father expressed his pride and desire to re-enter my life. By Wednesday, cousins were receiving calls from aunts and uncles. Amy texted that she was so impressed by my achievement that everyone was talking about me. Linda also phoned to tell that she had always had faith in me. An easy way to change the past. I was going through applications for a new chef post on Thursday morning. An unknown number called on my phone. I replied, Erica Mitchell, against my better judgment. It's Brian Erica, the husband of your sister. That was not what was expected. Brian, what can I do for you? Let me get straight to the point. My vehicle repair company is growing, as you are aware. Regarding the financing, the bank is being challenging. As a family investment, I was hoping you may be open to lending us $50,000. I almost burst out laughing. Why would I do that too? He responded, well, we're family. As though that clarified everything. And for Vanessa, it would mean a lot. Since Saturday night, she has been agitated. The sibling she had spent years rejecting as useless probably destroyed her moment of fame. Brian, good luck with the bank, but I'm not interested in investing in your company. Erica, hurry up. Now you have money. Would not harm you in order to assist your sister. That's the same sister that publicly referred to me as a loser and said that I couldn't afford to go to her dinner. That sister. A pause occurred. That was not her intention. Vanessa gets, you know. Regretfully, I was aware that I had grown up in adolescence knowing precisely how Vanessa became entitled, harsh, and always supported by our parents. No, I would say, never call again. I ended the call. Vanessa herself phoned less than an hour later. You are a self-centered jerk. Without a preface, she spit. Your refusal to assist Brian is your method of retaliating for your long-standing jealousy of me. Vanessa, I'm not envious of you. I wasn't. So why don't you give us the loan? Obviously, you can afford it. All you want is for us to suffer. I inhaled deeply. This family neglected me for years. Years being told I wasn't worthy, intelligent, or good enough. You suddenly recall that I exist now that you have what you desire. There was a long stillness. Fine, she eventually said. Be that manner. Everyone is discussing how having money has made you cruel and aloof. Your belief that you are too wonderful for your family. Right now, the twisted logic nearly made me laugh. Vanessa, goodbye. After that, I blocked her number right away. The following weeks were filled with work. We hired important personnel, completed the designs for the new site, and adjusted our menu to suit the new market. Robert and I worried about 1,000 details for long days, meetings, and longer nights. My family persisted in their efforts to make amends. My office received flowers. My mother's voicemails were filled with tears. I received an email from my father recalling my childhood achievements which he had never recognized before. I paid them all no attention. As we went over the design ideas for the new site one evening, Robert stated, you know, you could just have one meeting with them and be done with it. I raised my eyes from my computer. Why would I do that? Because it's distracting you and they won't quit. He was not mistaken. Thoughts of my family kept creeping in even though I tried my hardest to concentrate only on our growth. Recollections of previous slights. Fantasies of telling them precisely what I believed, envisioned discussions where they apologized after years of disrespect and favoritism. What would I even say to them? Robert shrugged. The reality that you don't need them in your life and that you created it without them. Right now, or that you'd like a relationship but on different conditions. Closure could help you move on in either case. Perhaps I admitted, but not just yet. There is too much work for us to do. And we did. The new site was our largest project to date. We were building a gourmet event venue with private dining rooms, cooking lessons, and a rooftop bar in addition to a restaurant. It was big, costly, and just the challenge I needed. On the day we completed the lease, Robert and his wife Diane took me out to celebrate. To fresh beginnings, Diane toasted, lifting her glass, and to the greatest business partner Robert could have found. Robert said, I still find it hard to believe you pitched me that restaurant makeover at the age of 22. I've never made a better choice than to listen to you. I said thank you with a warmth that was unrelated to the wine. For putting your faith in me. For having faith in me when others did not. Diane gripped my hand as she stretched across the table. That is the role of true family. Erica, they believe in you. They support you. They appreciate your triumphs instead of becoming frightened by them. Her comments touched home. The folks at this table, Robert, Diane, our restaurant managers, our cooks, Even our regular customers had showed me more support and respect than my biological family ever had. They were my true family. Right now. I saw that they were all grinning as I looked around. I understood that neither my sister nor my parents needed to be reconciled. Their late interest in my life and their praise